This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto was trained by Dark Naruto and Kyuubi. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Always wasting no time. Let's start the story.
A lone boy was strolling through Konohagakure no Sato's streets. He was glared at or mentioned in whispers by the villagers and a few shinobi who lost loved ones in the battle against the Nine-tailed demon fox 8 years ago. Naruto Uzumaki, the Nine-tails Jinchuriki, is the boy's name. He has fair skin, whisker marks on his face, blue eyes, and spiky blonde hair. He was dressed in green cargo pants, blue ninja sandals, and a blue shirt underneath a hooded orange jacket with no sleeves and a red spiral whirlpool on the back. He finds it hard to comprehend why he was so despised and treated like filth by the ninja and villagers. Why are they treating him this way when he did nothing wrong? His parents passed away the day he was born, so he has no family. Since many of the children's parents advised them to avoid him, he has no friends. They will only tell them that he is a freak and a troublemaker. He does little for the third Hokage, Ayame, and Tuchi. Gigi from the Ichiraku ramen bar, but no one else cared about him or wanted him around. The majority of the villagers chose to ignore him, though a few would beat him or drive him away. He can still recall what the ninja and villagers said to him or whispered behind his back. "I told you not to talk to that boy, let's go." "Oh, there, that's him. Go away, monster, monster, monster." Slowly raising his face, Naruto gazed up at the sky, watching the clouds as he recalled what had happened earlier, his eyes filled with hurt and sadness. Rewind. After classes at the Ninja Academy ended, Naruto was making his way home when he noticed some children his age playing in the park. He approaches them. He said, "Hey guys." The children then halted their play and turned to face him, gazing at him with fear, disgust, and mistrust. With a hint of annoyance in his voice, the oldest child said, "Oh, it's you. Well, what do you want, you freak?" After flinching at this, Naruto nervously lowered his head and said, "Well, I was wondering if I could play with you?" in the hopes that they would become friends. The children exchanged trembling glances before erupting into laughter. Naruto was horrified and in a state of shock. Before long, tears began to form in his eyes and trickle down his cheeks. The older child told his friends, "Oh, that's hilarious. Did you hear that, boys? The freak wants to play with us," which made them laugh even harder. Tears began to form wet patches on the ground and continued to pour down Naruto's face. They laughed and spat in his face when he asked if he could play with them. With a quick turn, Naruto left, crying quietly so they wouldn't see him in this state. He noticed Sasuke Uchiha sitting by himself at the dock's edge as he continued along the path. He paused and gazed at him sorrowfully for a moment. Sasuke quickly detects his presence and scowls as he turns to face him. Then, unable to control the tears that were streaming down his face, Naruto glared back at him. He averts his gaze and continues to move. Startled by this, Sasuke watches him leave, but he frowns and looks back out to the lake with regret. Flashback end. Looking up with a sad expression, Naruto sees Sakura Haruno, the smartest and most attractive girl in the academy and the object of his crush, strolling down the street. She has fair skin, green eyes, and bright pink hair. She wore a red ribbon to secure her hair, blue sandals, a short red keep-out dress with white circular patterns and a black band around her waist, and baggy dark red shorts. As Naruto rushes to her in the hopes that she will return his affection and provide him with some company, a ring of hope emerges inside his heart. "Hey, what's up, Sakura-chan?" When he stops in front of her, Sakura glares at him. After class, she tried to find Sasuke, but he simply vanished. In order to learn more about him, she hoped to spend time with him. With a frustrated tone, she said, "What do you want, Naruto?" as her emerald green eyes gazed at him. Naruto said, "Well, I was wondering if we could hang out with each other and get to know each other," nervously. He wasn't in the mood to explain to her why he wanted to spend time with her. She snapped back, "Why should I hang out with you?" Naruto grinned and remarked, "Well, we're in the same class, so." "You're annoying," she said, her tone completely hateful. Stunned, Naruto stood there. Isn't he annoying? Why is he bothersome? All he wanted was some companionship. Naruto reached out and gently grabbed Sakura's arm as she turned to go. Wait, Sakura-chan, how am I annoying?" He landed on his buttock as she swung around, shattering his hold and slugging him in the face, leaving a tick mark on her huge forehead. Many commuters paused to observe what was happening. "Because all you do is bug me. You seem quite at home interfering and enjoying it when I make mistakes. You don't understand one thing about me. You just annoy me," Sakura replied with sadness and rage. Naruto sat there tending to his injured cheek, stunned and shocked by what she had said. But that is not true. I don't enjoy making you feel bad, I just. With rage and hurt in her eyes, Sakura yelled, yes you do. I'm only interested in Sasuke-kun and you keep trying to hang out with me and turn my interest away from him. Naruto's expression darkens and he looks down in defeat because he couldn't refute anything she just said. When she stopped in the middle of her stride, she turned to face him and grinned, saying, oh and by the way, Okazen is right. You're just a freak, a monster. Naruto's eyes were filled with horror as he gazed at her, his chest aching. As Sakura turned and left, Naruto felt as though time was moving slowly. Sakura had just broken Naruto's heart and will, and he just sat there, heartbroken and devastated. Is he the one? A female villager asked another, to which the other responded. Yeah, he is. The observing villagers grinned and then burst out laughing. Some of the villagers mumbled things like, ha, serve him right, or, you got that right, or, ha ha. A freak like you will never have friends. In response to the whispers and laughter of the villagers, Naruto wept silently as Sakura's words continued to reverberate in his head and the villagers' words fueled the flames. As he sobbed, he fell to his knees and began to claw at the dirt. Mindscape. Before he heard the sound of water dripping, Naruto kept crying. He looked up to discover that he was in a concrete corridor with water up to his ankles, numerous corridors, and cables running along the ceiling. The long corridor was shadowed and dark at both ends. He stood up slowly while sniffling and looked around before being startled by a loud growl. Huh? The growl came from a hallway behind him, and he began to search for its origin. Then he locates the hallway and proceeds down it. At the end of the hall, the room was dim with bright light. The growling intensified as Naruto approached the room slowly. When he stepped inside, he discovered that the room was enormous and had a gate at the end. Seal is written in kanji on a tag that is attached to the cage's door. Where am I? Behind the bars, Naruto saw a mouth full of white teeth and a pair of red eyes open. The pupils were slitted, and the eyes were a deep red. Naruto trembles in terror as he sees the creature. It's enormous. What is it? The creature said, hey kid, come closer, in a deep, feminine voice. Naruto approached the bars slowly, but when claws swung out to harm him, he jumped away with a cry of terror, only to be stopped by the gate's bars. The creature said, I want to eat and kill you, but this gate won't open, before squinting its eyes in frustration. Damn Fuinjutsu. When Naruto realized what the beast was, he dropped to his knees and gazed up at it in fear and wonder, saying, why? You are, the Nine Tails. With a fixed gaze on Naruto, the Nine Tails remarked, for you to approach me, what business brought you here? He rose slowly and gazed at it in wonder. How can the Nine Tails possibly be present? But where is this place? How are you even here, though? You were defeated by the fourth Hokage. That is because you are in your subconscious, kid, your mind, the demon fox said, letting out a loud laugh before responding. Shortly after your birth, your fourth Hokage sealed me inside you, making you my new Jinchuriki. I will rip that damned man to shreds if I ever see him again for turning me into a child like you. His eyes widened at the assumption, and he suddenly realized something about the Nine Tails. Its voice sounded feminine to him, which would mean, you're a girl? Wait a minute. Shocked, Naruto asked. Do you have a problem with that? The Nine Tails asked deadpan, leaning closer to Naruto and revealing her entire face. Her intense gaze and expression, which conveyed the message, say something stupid and you're dead, caused Naruto to pale and quickly shock his head. The Nine Tails grinned and said, that's what I thought, before lowering her head. Now, as I mentioned before, what business brought you before me? I am not familiar with myself. I'm completely lost. First I tried to make friends again and got laughed at, Naruto whimpered, draping his head in despair. I don't know how to go on anymore. Sakura Chan then hits me and calls me a monster when I try to be friends with her. Then I was ridiculed and laughed at by the villagers. This was becoming intriguing to the Nine Tails, and she will have to take action because the last thing she needs is her host attempting to harm or kill himself. The stare lessened as her rage for Konoha began to grow. Her host must have been severely beaten by the villagers for him to be in this condition. Naruto, I've been watching you since birth. I am aware that you have had a gloomy life. You are the target of this pitiful village's ire because of something you are completely unaware of. Every human being is the same. However, you had a dream that one day everyone would respect you and acknowledge your existence, even going so far as to become their leader. But now that you've been crushed by the person you foolishly cared about the most, you're wondering if that dream is even possible. The Sakura one? Tears began to fall from his eyes and trickle into the water at his feet as he began to absorb everything she had said and stared down with a sad expression. He knew that what she had said was true, and he hoped that one day he would become Hokage so that everyone would recognize him. However, after what Sakura had done and the way the villagers treated him, he realized that those dreams were only dreams, and after discovering that he had 9 tails inside of him, everything that had happened to him began to make sense. That's why they all despise me, then. They all believe that I am a freak or a beast. However, they are mistaken. You 9 tails are not me. His hands clenched into fists and his eyes narrowed as he spoke in an angry tone. To Naruto's surprise, a new voice said, "Yes, you're right," adding, "And we'll make them pay for what they did to us." At the doorway, Naruto turned to see a shadowed figure walking towards them. The light showed that the figure was, astonishingly, another Naruto, with the exception that his eyes had a black sclera and a red iris. When he appears, the 9 tails' eyes enlarge in surprise. Who are you?" Naruto raised an eyebrow in question. After a brief moment of laughter, the other Naruto declared, "I am you, the real you," grinning malevolently. "I am the pain and hatred you have been holding inside, the darkness that resides at the core of your heart. Your darkness is me." This Naruto is the darkness that resides deep within his own heart. Does everyone have a dark version of themselves? My darkness. Naruto's eyes widen in shock, unable to believe what he is hearing. "Well, this is interesting," the 9 tails said with a toothy grin and a few giggles, while Naruto turned to face her bewildered. "You must have had a truly devastating and traumatizing event, kid," the 9 tails decided to explain to him after noticing the look. "Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see your darkness unless you went to a very sacred place." With a dejected and anxious tone, Naruto looked from the 9 tails to Dark Naruto and said, "What do you want? You're here, but why?" With a kind smile, Dark Naruto said, "Well, to help you for one." Gazing up at him, Naruto gasped, To assist me?" "Well, not just me," Dark Naruto said, nodding and gazing at the 9 tails. "I intended to persuade 9 tails to serve as your sensei." After blinking briefly, Naruto looked at the 9 tails, who nodded slightly and let out a deep sigh before asking Dark Naruto, "Really? For me, you're doing that?" Dark Naruto said, That's right." Then, ashamed, Naruto turned his head and stared at the ground. "However, why? You're doing this for me, but why?" Naruto inquired. "Well, just because I want us to get back at those villagers and Sakura," Dark Naruto said, laughing and turning to face Naruto. "Besides, I was found by the 9 tails themselves. She wants us to help her exact revenge on a certain man because she likes me." "Who?" Naruto asked, bewildered, turning to face him. Dark Naruto said, squinting his eyes, "I'm not sure, but he proclaims to be Madara Uchiha himself." Blinking, Naruto said, "Who is that?" "He is the founder of the Uchiha clan of the Konoha. Regretfully, I knew that the Madara had passed away. It was this man who, using his cursed Sharingan to control me, freed me from my previous host and made me attack Konoha." With fiery flames in her eyes, the 9 tails spoke. With a gasp, Naruto questioned, "Really? Did you have no choice but to attack Konoha?" The 9 tails nodded sadly before her face erupted in rage. "Yes, unfortunately," she said, "the Konoha.nin continued attacking me even after the 4th Hokage managed to free me from his control. This only made me more hateful, so I had no choice but to murder anyone who dared to come near me. The 4th pinned me with a toad summon and then teleported me somewhere else just as I was about to kill them. Then he sealed my yin chakra within the Shinigami with the dead demon consuming seal, and then he imprisoned me in my yang chakra within you with the 8 trigram seal," the 9 tails said, his eyes darkening dangerously. Out of pure hatred and rage for the 4th, she then slammed her left fist into the wall next to her. Her face was filled with hurt, rage, and frustration as she moved her hand away for the wall. "You two have no idea what it's like to be locked up out of fear of your power or to be controlled against your will and sealed away to be used as a weapon. Furthermore, someone regains control over you just as you are trying to break free, only to have you imprisoned once more after you were released from his hold. Every single one of you fucking humans is the same." The 9 tails whispered to the 2, "You only want to enslave us tailed beasts and use our power for your own purposes regardless of our own feelings," and then she lay down with her head resting on her crossed arms without even looking at them. Dark Naruto turned to face Naruto, who gave him his whole focus, and said, "Now Naruto, do you want all the suffering, loneliness, and hatred to end? Do you wish to exact revenge on the villagers who have rejected and hated you thus far?" With tears in his eyes, Naruto nodded and uttered the feeble words, "Yeah, but what should I do?" "That's easy. All the pain will disappear if you embrace your anger and hatred," Dark Naruto said. After crying, Naruto embraced Dark Naruto, who gave him a gentle back rub and said, "I'm here for you. The only person who can relate to you is me. I'll help you put an end to it." We both suffered. After wiping away his tears, Naruto turned to face him and said, "Thank you." "I know I don't have any right to ask you of this," Naruto said, turning to face the 9 Tails. "But we've both been mistreated and made to feel like people we're not. I want to earn your trust so that I can one day exact revenge on the man who started it all. When I need some of your chakra, will you kindly give it to me?" After a moment of staring into Naruto's eyes, the 9 Tails sat up straight and grinned earnestly. "Humph. Naruto, you truly are a unique human. Then all right, I'll keep your promise. But before you fully earn my trust, you still have a ways to go. I'll donate some of my chakra for the time being. My little Jinchuriki, I will notify you when I am ready to start your training in a few days. Additionally, try not to murder any of the villagers just yet. Now is not the time to attract too much attention, even though I love you very much." The 9 Tails smiled genuinely and were being kind, which made Naruto smile as well. Naruto was left in awe. Naruto said, "Thank you 9 Tails," and bowed humbly. Turning back to Dark Naruto, Naruto saw that he was disappearing. Where are you going?" "We'll get together once more. In the meantime, Nichin, bye. Get more powerful. And remember that I will always be by your side," Dark Naruto said, withdrawing into the shadowy recesses of his thoughts as his body withered away. Mindscape's end. As he emerged from his subconscious, Naruto's sobs ceased, and he raised his head to glare at the gathered villagers, his face forming a frown as he heard their continuous laughter. "Stop talking." Despite his low growl, Naruto's voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. The villagers paused their laughter, looked at him, and then burst out laughing again, finding it amusing that the brat who had just been crying was now telling them to stop. "So why don't you go? Yes. You have no place in this village, move around. You will never be respected by anyone. Move around, move around, move around." As they chanted, "Get lost," Naruto squinted angrily. "Get lost, get lost." As he grunted with increasing anger, he slowly lowered his head, shadowing most of his upper face with his hair, but if you looked closely, you could see that he was changing in appearance. His eyes were closed, but his pupils were slitted, and his irises, which had been cerulean blue, had turned blood red, and he had black rings around his berserk-looking eyes. His canine teeth and nails grew longer and sharper, and his blonde hair, which stood on end, grew longer and more spiky, adding to his feral appearance. "Move. Move around. Move around. Move around. Get lost and vanish." When Naruto had had enough, he shook his lowered head from side to side with his fists, then thrust it down while snapping his head up and opening his eyes, shouting in great rage, "Shut the hell up." With a sound like boiling water, bubbles of red chakra appeared around parts of his body, and soon Naruto was on all fours as the chakra engulfed him in a bubbling chakra construct, forming a single long tail behind him and 2 long, pointy ears on top of his head, giving him the appearance of a one-tailed fox. The villagers stopped taunting him and stared at him in his new look. As the villagers realized what was happening, they stared in horror. Naruto turned to face them and gave them a menacing, killer intent growl, his lone tail whooshing back and forth as he glared at them with rage in his eyes, saying, "I've had enough of you people. I'm sick of you focusing all of your animosity on me." Naruto stood up and yelled, causing a gust of wind to blow away from him, "You will all pay for the pain that you made me suffer through all this time." The faces of the villagers turned pale and filled with horror as they gradually retreated from him. "I am not the 9 Tails Dabbao. I am Naruto Uzumaki, do not forget that." Naruto yelled and hurled a chakra arm at the villagers as the gust subsided. The arm grew to 16, causing the villagers to scream in horror and run for their lives, but they did not make it very far before Naruto's 16 chakra arms caught 16 of them and began pulling them back towards him, beating them within an inch of their lives. Several Chunin and Jonin who were in the vicinity felt the chakra spike and went to investigate its origin. When they saw what Naruto was going to do to the villagers, they attempted to move in and stop him, but that was a mistake in and of itself because they were swatted away by a chakra arm that he launched from his free arm. Since no one appeared to be left to stop him at this point, he dragged the villagers back to him, where they screamed and cried out for help as he began to slug and beat them indiscriminately and senselessly, both men and women. He didn't care because they were the cause of his suffering. The villagers he had captured, along with the Chunin and Jonin who had attacked him, were all lying on the ground, moaning and groaning in agony, all of them bruised and suffering from severe chakra burns caused by the 9 tails chakra. One Jonin, who had attempted to stab Naruto from behind with a sword, saw it coming from the corner of his eye and easily dodged it, and when he missed, the man tried to slash him, but Naruto's chakra tail parred the blow, and he blasted him away with a chakra roar into a building wall. Ironically, he was killed by his own sword, which the Jonin released from the shockwave, impaling the wall of the building he was blown into, and drove itself through his chest, right into his heart. Then Naruto got up from his last victim, panting with tears of rage and sorrow, and he yelled in anger mixed with pain mixed with the roar of the 9 tails. As he turned to go, Naruto's demon fox shroud began to lose shape when he froze at the sound of something falling and hitting the ground with a clang, and someone gasping in fear. The chakra shroud quickly regained its shape as Naruto snarled in surprise, looking down the alley to his right and seeing a small shadowed figure. He then leapt at the figure with a yell, knocking down the figure who shrieked in fear, and when he could see who it was, he froze with his fist in mid-swing. It was Hinata Hyuga, the shy girl from his class, the heiress to the Hyuga clan, with dark blue hair, fair skin, and lavender-tinged eyes. She wore a tan hooded jacket over a purple t-shirt, black pants, and blue sandals, and she trembled from shock and fright with a hint of curiosity. He could sense the fear in her right away, not just from his appearance, but from what he did and was going to do to her. Unlike most of the villagers and children, she never shunned him or treated him like the plague. Naruto.kun. As she gazed into his wide, slitted crimson eyes, she whimpered in nervousness and mild fear, fearing what he would do next, until his expression shifted from one of anger to one of horror. When Naruto lowered his head in shame, shadowing his upper face as he lowered his fist to the ground, Hinata turned back to him with a suspicious look. Naruto stared at her in shock, then at the fist he was going to use to punch her, and back to her. He gradually calmed down, causing the demon fox shroud to fade, but the feral appearance persisted. He choked out, "Hinata, I'm sorry," as Hinata's face began to well up with tears. Before she could say anything, Naruto slowly got up off her, left the alley, and began to walk away. Hinata gasped in surprise at the tears, then saw the anguished and remorseful look on his lower face. "Naruto." Abruptly, a voice called out to him. He paused and looked over his shoulder to see the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, coming into view. He had just sensed the demonic chakra and had chosen to investigate it behind him, along with 2 Anbu who stood next to the cage, prepared to fight if necessary. He also saw Hinata, who had gotten up and was hiding against the building's wall in the alley, still staring at him in disbelief. As he stared at Naruto in disbelief, the Hokage looked around and took in the scene, seeing numerous people who had been badly burned and beaten, along with one dead. He knew something terrible had happened because he had seen Naruto do this earlier through his viewing orb, and he made the decision to find out why. "Naruto, what happened here? You're not like this. You've never been this way before. What became of the carefree, happy boy who aspired to become Hokage?" Hiruzen questioned in a somber yet startled tone. Halfway around, Naruto tipped his head back slightly and gazed at him impassively before uttering the words, "He's gone. Hokage." Sama, in a chilly but anguished monotone. Not only was Hiruzen's cerulean blue eyes, which were joyful and full of life, gone, but they were also blood red with slitted pupils that were cold and hurt, full of loneliness, pain, and hatred. Hiruzen's eyes widened in shock at Naruto, who was never formal and had that tone of voice. "I am the new Naruto. I refuse to accept shit from the locals or its shinobi, nor will I continue to be the silly, blonde-haired fool that people can spit on or frown at." That Naruto passed away just now, Naruto remarked, a little hurt and angry. Remembering what she saw Sakura say and do to him, Hinata gasped and looked down to the ground sadly, understanding his current feelings as she stared back at him as he went on. "If I have to kill, I won't think twice. These folks here should count themselves fortunate that I only did this to them. They won't be as fortunate the next time, and I won't be as forgiving. I can no longer tolerate this village any longer. I will no longer do anything for the village because they have never wanted me there and have not shown me any kindness. Even though I don't trust you as much as I once did, I will only be faithful to you, the Hokage, and no one else at this time." Naruto, what happened to you? You were harmed by whom? As he gazed at the new, darker version of the foolish, spiky, blonde-haired boy he knew and loved like another grandson, Hiruzen asked in shock and disbelief. With a sigh, Naruto's savage features vanished, replaced by a look of hurt and rage, and he briefly turned to face Hinata before averting his gaze and stating, "Ask Hinata if you truly want to know." She witnessed everything so that she could tell you about everything that took place here. Go ask Sakura Haruno if that isn't sufficient. Even though her story is a little different from yours, I have no doubt that she will tell you what happened. For my part, I'm done for the day. I'm heading home. See you around, old man. The spiky blonde boy then began to walk away toward his apartment, and Hinata emerged from the alley, paused at the side of the road, and yelled, "Naruto-kun, wait, return." But he ignored the cry and kept walking without even looking, leaving everyone who wasn't present at the massacre wondering what had happened to him and whether the old Naruto had truly vanished forever. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed and quickly collected himself, turning to Hinata, who was still staring at the spot where Naruto had disappeared, and said, "Hinata, come with me to my office." They all watched as Naruto's retreating figure disappeared from view as he walked away towards his apartment. "I need to talk about what you just witnessed and hear what transpired." With a glance up at him, Hinata answered, "Why? Yes, Hokage. Sama." Hiruzen turned to his Anbu escort as Hinata approached him and said, "Anbu, locate Sakura Haruno and bring her to my office right away. She must also tell me what happened to Naruto. I need your assistance getting the injured to the hospital after that." "Yes, sir." Before they jumped off, they shouted. Hiruzen turned to face the Jonin when another team of Anbu and some of them arrived. The Jonin were Might Guy, Kakashi Hitaki, and Asuma Sarutobi, his son. The Anbu squad was led by a woman who was about 5 feet 8 inches tall, with chocolate brown eyes that were hidden by a cat-shaped mask that had 3 red stripes on it. 1 on the forehead and 2 on each cheek. "We sensed the vast chakra and arrived as quickly as we could, Hokage. Sama. What took place here?" As she and the others surveyed the scene, she asked. There were several seriously injured people on the street, and one was clearly dead. With a sorrowful sigh, Hiruzen gazed in the direction Naruto had gone before uttering, "It was Naruto, Yugao." The blonde-haired boy was always cheerful, vivacious, and gregarious, so the Anbu and Jonin gasped in shock and disbelief. They never really believed he would do this. What happened to him to make him do it? This was done by Naruto. How? What made him act in this way? As he and the Jonin observed the devastation, Kakashi posed the question. "I don't know at the moment," Hiruzen said after letting out a sigh and shaking his head. But for some reason, he lost his temper, drew forth its might, and attacked the shinobi and villagers. They might also have contributed to the cause. He killed one victim and left many others alive. Here, young Hinata Hyuga was the only person he did not hurt. The Anbu and Jonin gazed in wonder at the young heir to the main house of the Hyuga clan. Yugao turned back to Hiruzen and inquired about everyone's thoughts, saying, "But how? I don't understand. Given that Hinata-san was influenced by it, why was he spared while the others were not?" The Jonin present gave a nod of agreement. As he thought about it, Hiruzen gazed up at the sky and said, "I think it's because he had some control over its power and, although the villagers despised and avoided him, Hinata here did not. Therefore, he had no motive to hurt her." Yugao turned back to the injured and nodded, saying, "That makes a lot of sense." "You truly believe that?" With her eyes wide with hope, Hinata asked him. "Yes, Hinata, I do genuinely. Can you now explain what transpired between the moment he stopped and our arrival?" Well, when he stopped attacking the villagers and the shinobi trying to protect them, I was trying to walk away quietly," Hinata stammered as she began to reflect on the past events. "However, I threw something over in the alleyway, which alerted him to my presence. He then threw me to the ground and tried to hit me with his fist, but he stopped in his tracks when he realized it was me. I thought he was going to hurt me based on the expression in his eyes, but then his face changed to one of horror and fear. Then he got up and left after saying he was sorry to me. You appeared at that point, Hokage. Sama. And he looked directly at me a few moments ago, with sad eyes, before turning his head to leave." While everyone listened in disbelief, Hiruzen nodded and said, "I see. He was embarrassed that he nearly struck you in a fit of rage. He was upset that he nearly hurt someone who wasn't involved, and you were innocent throughout it all. Furthermore, his feelings serve as a catalyst for the release of its power. The seal must have been sufficiently weakened by whatever had happened to him prior to the attack to be able to use some of its strength. He now extracts more power the more he becomes agitated and upset." "You mean the 9 tails, don't you?" Hinata asked feebly as she slowly turned to face him. As Hiruzen asked gravely, "How did you know?" everyone stared at her in complete disbelief that she knew. "I asked my bodyguard, Ko Hyuga, about it, but he dismissed it, telling me not to worry about it." Hinata looks in Naruto's direction and laments, "When I first saw him in passing, some of the villagers called him 9 tails. Then, today, Naruto, disguised as a fox and covered in a shroud of chakra, yelled that he was not the Nine Tails before attacking the villagers, indicating that he is also aware of it. Knowing that the truth was now out, he nodded, cleared his throat, and then yelled, "Ahem. You gal. I want you and your squad to help take everyone here to the hospital." He sighed in frustration at the foolishness of the villagers and pinched the bridge of his nose. "I want you all to assist them with that as well. Kakashi, Asuma, and Guy. Get out." "Yes, sir. What happened to you, Naruto?" He thought worriedly. "What did Sakura do to you that pushed you over the edge and made you act this way?" They answered, then jumped to the rooftops and headed for the hospital, taking as many as they could carry. Then he turned back to Hinata and said, "Hinata, hurry up. I want to first hear your thoughts on what transpired here." Hinata nodded softly, "Yes, Hokage Sama," and they both turned to head for the academy. The apartment of Naruto. The only thing that had kept Naruto going up until now was his dream of becoming Hokage someday so that the entire village could finally recognize him, but he was beginning to realize that dream was just that, a dream, and that it was unlikely to ever come true. Naruto is currently lying out on his bed with his arms behind his head and his legs crisscrossed. He had just finished taking a shower and changed his clothes. His secondary and hidden goal was still trying to find any acceptance at all in the village, that is, to find someone out there who will acknowledge him for who he is. He closed his eyes and fell into a peaceful slumber, feeling both mentally and physically exhausted from today's events. However, he has a new goal starting today. To become a ninja, get stronger, and then someday seek out and kill this masked man for using the Nine Tails, trying to destroy Konoha, killing many of its people, including his parents, and making his life miserable as a result. Office of the Hokage, and that's what happened before what I told you earlier happened, Hokage Sama, Hinata concluded as she described what had happened to Naruto and the subsequent attack, telling Hiruzen how Sakura Haruno had humiliated and scolded him in front of the villagers before Naruto had transformed into a one-tailed form and attacked the villagers as well as the shinobi who attempted to stop him. The thought that young Sakura had single-handedly crushed Naruto so horribly and devastatingly when he just wanted to make a friend and have someone acknowledge his existence caused him to have a mental breakdown. The villagers' mockery of his misfortune and taunting only made matters worse, as he snapped and unleashed the power of the Nine Tails before lashing out in hurt, anger, and sorrow. Hiruzen sighed deeply and rubbed his temple after learning what had happened from Hinata. A knock on the door soon followed, and Hiruzen looked up and said in a cool but firm voice, "Come in." When the door slowly opened, Hinata turned her head and scowled deeply, her eyes narrowing as she saw that it was Sakura Haruno standing there. "Hokage Sama, you wanted to see me?" Sakura inquired, perplexed as to why she was required to visit the Hokage's office, particularly at this hour of the day. "Yeah, Sakura." He motioned for her to enter, saying, "Please come in and close the door." She shut the door and stood beside Hinata in front of the Hokage, asking, "Why is Hinata here?" As she glanced at her and Hinata turned away. As far as she could recall, Hinata was kind to everyone in class, despite her extreme shyness and meekness. And why was she looking at me like that? She asked herself, genuinely perplexed because Hinata had just glared at her. Hiruzen put his hands together and explained, "She just finished explaining to me what happened during a little incident a while ago and part of it involves you." Sakura asked in surprise as she turned back to face Hokage, Me? What was it I did?" "We're getting to that point. She claims that you and Naruto Uzumaki got into a fight during your encounter. Is this accurate?" With his face resting against his fisted hands, Hiruzen posed the question. When Hinata and the Hokage saw Sakura's slight frown, they remarked, "Yes, we did, so what?" "Hokage Sama, what am I to do with this?" "Well, could you describe what transpired?" In the hopes of discovering the root cause of Naruto's attack, Hiruzen said, "I'd like to hear your side of the story." Sakura said, "Well, after class, I went looking for Sasuke-kun to ask him about something and maybe hang out together," as she looked up thoughtfully and considered her day. "Then, without warning, Naruto approached me and asked if we could spend some time together. I told him to stop bothering me and to leave. He grabbed me as I attempted to move away. His persistence made me a little irate, so I punched him in the face. I went on to tell him that he loves it when I make mistakes and has no idea how I feel. That he is simply bothersome." "After that, what did you say to him?" Hiruzen asked, squinting a little because he knew the answer to why Naruto had lost his mind would be revealed in what she said next. "I told him that Okazen was right about him being an annoyance, a freak, a monster," Sakura said, her face slightly disgusted but still irritated. Hinata gave her a fierce glare, and Hiruzen's eyes widened in shock and horror for a moment before closing them and letting out a long sigh, shaking his head. Thus, Naruto experienced that. Hiruzen put his face against these clenched hands and remarked, "Now it all makes sense." He looked at Sakura in disappointment, thinking, that was the trigger. Foolish girl, do you have any idea of what you just did? Even I might not be able to fix the damage that you have just caused. What did that baka do this time? Sakura asked, sighing, as she stared at the Hokage, perplexed by what he had just said. He's always getting into trouble and getting into trouble, geez. However, that is most likely what occurs when you are parentless. Naruto is selfish and spoiled as a result. He is by himself. He lacks shinobi skill and is a pitiful, ignorant fool. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes slightly as Sakura swore, and Hinata clenched her teeth and grunted in rage as Sakura said those hateful words, but at the last sentence, her eyes glowed with fiery rage, and she snapped because she could no longer stand Sakura insulting Naruto for something she didn't understand. She summoned her Byakugan and punched Sakura square in the face while yelling in rage. "You selfish, cold-hearted bitch, you have no idea about him," Hinata shouted in a fit of rage. Although Hiruzen was momentarily stunned, he wasn't overly shocked by what had just happened because he knew that Hinata had feelings for Naruto, very deep feelings for someone so young, which may have begun as admiration due to a past incident, or as a result of sharing similar struggles and being inspired to be like him. It may have developed into a crush shortly after they became classmates, but after these recent events, she may have developed a deep understanding of the boy and was beginning to turn into love. Therefore, he knew that, as shocking as it is for her to do so, it was only natural for Hinata to lash out when Sakura began saying absolute nonsense about a boy she greatly admired. However, if Hinata takes it too far and becomes more physical, he will have to intervene, regardless of his feelings. Sakura stumbled a little and got her bearings, holding her bruised and sore cheek and staring back at Hinata in disbelief. Sakura always knew Hinata was a quiet and shy person and never imagined that she would attack anyone, especially her. Naruto-kun will never be the same person that everyone knew before you, Sakura-chan. He so badly wanted to be recognized. It was gradually hurting him, and he is lonely. You berated him in front of the villagers and spat in his face when he asked you to be his friend. He's the reason I push myself to become strong, to be like him. Hinata yelled at her, fighting back tears that were forming in her eyes. The majority of the people in this village are no better than you. Sakura stared at her in disbelief at what she had told her, and now she was beginning to feel a little remorse for what she had said to Naruto. Then she began to sob slowly, hot tears streaming down her face as she fell to her knees. Enough of that, Hinata. You got your point, Hiruzen said softly to Hinata before turning to Sakura. Sakura, it wasn't appropriate for you to say such things about Naruto, he said. You're lucky to have your parents at least because he's had a difficult life thus far. In the shinobi world, very few people have them or do. However, I appreciate your assistance. You are now free to return home. Sakura bowed and turned to face him, saying, Thank you, Hokage-sama. Sakura turned away, opened the door, and left after giving Hinata one final glance. A moment later, Hinata got to her feet, lowered her gaze, and said, Hokage-sama, there's something I wanted to ask you. Hiruzen sighed and was about to respond when the two Anbu from earlier appeared behind Hinata, kneeling before the Hokage. Hiruzen had been staring at her and knew what she was going to say. Hokage-sama, the deceased have been taken to the morgue and the injured have been transferred to the hospital. Uzumaki's rampage has caused damage to a number of our businesses and buildings. 7 in total, sir, Naomi informed the Hokage, shocking Hinata with the extent of Naruto's destruction. Well done, both of you. Hiruzen closed his eyes and said, You're dismissed. Yes, sir. After saying that, they disappeared, leaving Hinata and the third Hokage by themselves in the room once more. I'm going to tell you the truth because I know you won't talk about it to anyone without my authorization and that you are concerned for Naruto, Hiruzen said, turning to Hinata and letting out a sigh. Additionally, you already know a portion of the truth, albeit not all of it. Do you promise not to tell anyone? Shock and surprise fill Hinata's eyes, and she nods hastily, Oh. Of course, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen nodded and smiled softly at her, saying, Good. Now, you recall how the late 4th Hokage battled and defeated the 9 Tails Demon Fox at the expense of his life, as the academy teachers told you in class? Hinata gave a slow nod, and Hiruzen went on, Well, it's not entirely accurate. A tailed beast composed entirely of pure chakra, the 9 tails are demon spirits. It cannot be completely destroyed or killed because it will resurrect itself within a few years. It must be contained within an object, such as a pot or a person. When Hinata realized she was correct, her eyes widened. She muttered, So, I was right, as she looked down at the floor with sympathy and sorrow in her eyes. Yes, Hiruzen said, nodding as he stood up and looked out the window at the village. The fourth Hokage used a prohibited fuinjutsu to seal the 9 tails inside Naruto. Only the villagers who fought the 9 tails 7 years ago are aware that the monster is imprisoned inside Naruto, as you are already aware. I ruled that no one shall speak about that incident, he said, closing his eyes. Those who violated this rule have received harsh punishment from me. You kids don't know anything about it anymore. The only good thing that has happened to Naruto is that the fourth Hokage's final wish before he was killed was for the villagers to view Naruto as a hero. Hinata asked, staring at the man bewildered, a hero? Hiruzen turned to face her and nodded, saying, yes, Hinata. After cutting the umbilical cord of a newborn baby, the fourth Hokage sealed the monster into the baby's navel. Naruto saved the village as the 9 tails receptacle. As Hiruzen sighed and continued to stare at the ground, Hinata looked down at it once more with comprehension. Unfortunately, the other villagers didn't see him like that, he said. Naruto is even considered by some to be the 9 tails himself. That mindset has gradually been transferred to their own offspring. Then he asked, Hinata, while once more gazing out the window, are you aware? What? Hinata asked, gazing at the Hokage's back. She listened, staring at him in disbelief and shocked. When someone is hated and people refuse to accept his existence, he sees it in the eyes of the people around him, he explained. I know you don't see him as the 9 tails, Hiruzen said, turning to face her. I only need to look at you to see that. Hinata, you have a tender and kind heart. I am also certain that Naruto won't hurt you needlessly. Then he took a seat on his deck after turning around and said, because of this, I ask you, Hinata Hyuga, to try to comfort and befriend Naruto. Hinata stammers, her face flushed and her eyes brightened. What? I know this is a lot to ask of you, Hiruzen sighed, but you may be the only one who has some control over him at this time. He is likely lonely and in pain, and the true Naruto may still be there deep inside of him. I want you to try to comfort him and acknowledge him in order to bring him back. You might also hold the secret to keeping him safe from those who would want to hurt him and preventing him from going on a rampage once more. Well, I, was the first thing that came out of Hinata's red face as she lowered it to the floor and began to play with her index fingers. I'm also aware that you have feelings for him, Hiruzen said with a smile. Thus, this is your opportunity to both acknowledge him and have him acknowledge your feelings for him. I am aware that you are a shy person and fear rejection, but I have no doubt that if you tell him how you truly feel, he will reciprocate. Since he currently has no one to call a friend or someone to trust, I doubt he will turn you down. He's always been searching for a friend and someone to accept him. You undoubtedly want him to recognize you as well. With a flushed face, Hinata looked to the side and said, I know he's right, and I should take a chance and confess my love to him. The Hokage read her like an open book and knew what she secretly desired. Well, I guess I could give it a try. I'm only requesting that, Hinata. Naruto going crazy again, killing more people, and getting into trouble with the Konoha Council is the last thing we need. Hinata bowed and turned to go when Hiruzen said, I think you might be the only one who can stop this from happening. Watching her leave through the door, he put his hands together and thought, I have faith in you, Hinata. I just hope that old Naruto is still inside. If you are unable to reach him, then only his mother, if she ever comes out of her coma, and his twin sister will be able to. After 2 days, Hinata had been attempting to approach Naruto to speak with him ever since the incident, but to no avail. Hiruzen had told her father, Hiyashi Hyuga, about her assignment, and although he wasn't entirely in favor of the Hokage's plan, he was somewhat concerned about her safety and didn't think she was capable of doing it. Hiruzen assured him that she was, and he didn't think Naruto would hurt her because of what he had done to her that day. Despite his reservations, Hiyashi agreed with having Hinata assist in keeping Naruto under control. They don't have classes at the academy because it was the weekend, so she would start at his apartment and he wouldn't be there, go to Ramen Ichiraku and be told that they hadn't seen him since that day, and then wander around Konoha in search of him, only to find him vanish as quickly as she found him. This pattern continued for 2 days until the second day's late afternoon. After her father's cruel training with her younger sister, Hanabi, Hinata was out for a walk when she saw Naruto and stopped where she was. He was walking down the street opposite hers, and she chose to follow him after he vanished from view, keeping a safe distance from him so he wouldn't notice her. They reached the Hokage monument after a few minutes of cautiously following him. Ironically, Naruto walked out and sat cross-legged on the fourth Hokage's head as the sun began to set close to the horizon, while Hinata gazed at him in confusion that he had such a side. After waiting for a few minutes, Naruto let out a sigh and cried out, Hinata, what do you want? She gulped nervously, walked out from behind the tree, and stopped a few feet away from him. Naruto lowered his head and began to tremble, which made Hinata freeze in shock and gasp. Hinata literally jumped out of her skin at the sound that he knew she was there. He didn't even turn his head to look. "I'll give you an apology if you came for one for nearly hurting you. I sincerely apologize, Hinata." "Now leave me alone," Naruto said in a strained voice, trying not to cry, and Hinata looked at him pityingly, stunned by his feelings about nearly hurting her. "Oh, no, Naruto-kun, don't worry." He stopped shaking and his eyes widened, a few tears streaming down his cheeks. "I didn't come here for that so you don't need to apologize for something you didn't do," she said, waving it away. In order to calm herself, she took a deep breath. "I just wanted to talk to you," she said. "What is R really about?" Naruto answered, looking at her out of the corner of his eye with a hint of curiosity. She told him about what Sakura and the villagers did to you, with sorrow in her eyes and voice. Looking away from her, Naruto lowered his head and clenched his fists between his legs, his eyes narrowing as the memories of that day flooded his mind with pain and rage. Naruto tried to sidestep the topic by saying, "Well, there's nothing to talk about," in a strained tone. "Yes, it is. Because you are acting as though you don't think anyone cares about you," Hinata screamed, tears welling up in her eyes. Hinata approached and sat beside him, knees to her chest, and she gazed at her knees with sorrow as Naruto flinched and then turned to look at her, startled. Naruto tensed up and turned his head away from Hinata as she explained. "The third told me about the 9 tails sealed inside you and that it's the reason the villagers hate you and that you're alone. But just because Sakura didn't acknowledge you doesn't mean that no one else has, considering that I have recognized you since before the academy." Naruto gasped and gave her a startled look in return. "I used to cry all the time and give up before I even tried until we got to the academy. I took a lot of incorrect turns, but Naruto-kun, you show me the right way to go. Naruto-kun, you influence my transformation. I feel like I'm gradually getting stronger. I've learned from that Sakura and villager incident that I need to do more for you. Because of this, I no longer hesitate to defend you the way you did for me. I admire and like you, Naruto-kun. Perhaps even beginning to fall in love with you," she said, gazing at him with a loving smile and a pink flush on her cheeks. Naruto gazed at Hinata, stunned and incredulous at what she had just said. He has never heard anyone say anything like that. Someone is finally recognizing him. However, it's possible that this is just another lie to deceive him and cause him pain. However, Hinata wouldn't act in such a manner, would she? She looks at Naruto anxiously as he turns his face away from her with a confused expression. "He's turning away from me, but why? What?" she asked herself. "Does he think I'm not into him?" In an attempt to get him to look at her, Hinata asked, "What's wrong, Naruto-kun?" With his hair pulled back from his face, Naruto questioned, "Is what you're saying true?" "What?" Hinata asked, briefly blinking at him. Looking at her with hurt and fear, Naruto questioned, "Is what you're saying true? How do I know that you're not trying to trick me so you can hurt me later?" he asked. "I just don't know who to true anymore. I don't want to be hurt like that again. I don't want to be alone anymore." Naruto sobbed into his knees after turning his head away and staring up at the sky for a while. Hinata's expression was one of utter shock, along with a hint of pain and destruction. Then Hinata did something Naruto had never seen her do before. She seized him and drew him into an embrace. Then there was a long silence. He gave Hinata a startled look in return. Hinata's hair obscured her face, and her hands were shaking as she gripped his back more tightly. Hinata sniffled and said, "Do you really believe that? Do you really think so little of me?" When Naruto saw that his shoulder was becoming slightly wet, he immediately recognized that it was due to tears. Hinata began to cry, hot tears streaming down her cheeks as she withdrew from the embrace. Hinata sat back on her knees and sobbed in front of him after asking, "How could you even think that? I care about you, Naruto-kun. I like you. Why would you think I would betray you like that?" After staring in disbelief, Naruto lowered his glare in embarrassment and embraced her. Naruto rubbed her back and closed his eyes after saying, "I'm sorry, Hinata, but everyone else has treated me the way. I just didn't know if could trust anyone again. Besides, if you really liked me, why didn't you come forth and tell me until now?" he asked. After releasing the hug and wiping away her tears with her sleeve, Hinata responded, "I was afraid you would reject me because I was too shy to tell you how I feel." Really? Naruto gasped and looked back at her. As she kept blotting away her tears, Hinata nodded. "Hinata, I'm terribly sorry I said earlier. I guess I am just still hurt and angry with Sakura and the villagers. Can you forgive me and maybe be my friend?" Naruto said earnestly, feeling even more ashamed of what he had said to her earlier. Hinata looked up, startled, and her eyes welled up with tears as she grinned broadly. Then she leapt for Naruto and gave him a hug. When she did this, Naruto was taken aback, and his eyes widened as she shed happy tears. Yes. I forgive you, Naruto-kun. Thank you for giving me a chance. I promise I won't betray you or hurt you, Naruto-kun. And I would love to be your friend. Thank you, Hinata, for caring and being my friend, my first friend, Naruto said with a smile as he gave her a hug in return. Naruto was giving Hinata a chance, which made her happy. Perhaps she can now ease his pain and loneliness. She hoped Naruto would assist her in her training as well. When Naruto abruptly broke the embrace and spoke, she snapped out of her reverie. Hinata, she inquired, startled. I always thought of you as, Naruto said, turning away with a flush. Well? Her heart began to pound as she gazed at him with wide, anxious eyes. With a broad smile, he said sardonically, a dark, timid, and weird person. Naruto-kun, Hinata said sadly, her head lowered in disappointment as that hit her like a rock striking a bell. With a genuine smile, Naruto remarked, but you know something, I like people like you, Datbeo. With a cherry-red flush on her cheeks, Hinata snapped her head up and gazed at him in shock. What he just said blew her heart away. Then, seeing the expression on her face, Naruto gave a small laugh. The embarrassed Naruto said, Say Hinata, do you mind if I could come over sometime and study with you? Without making eye contact. Hinata said as she emerged from her reverie. The back of Naruto's head flushed as he said, Well, I thought we could study together. I need a little help on some stuff I cannot understand. Maybe I can even help you with your training and you with mine. He said, Sure Naruto-kun, we can study and train together. I can help you on what you're stuck with and we can help each other in our ninja training. Hinata blushed a little at what he was saying, then smiled adoringly, which Naruto thought made her look cute. Really? Naruto asked, staring her in the eye. Hinata nodded and said, Yeah, I'm sure my family wouldn't mind. I hope so, at least, she told herself. Great. Then together, we will graduate from the academy and become shinobi. We'll climb the ranks and achieve our dreams together. Why? You mean it? Hinata was the one who was now staring in disbelief. I'm not going to run away. I never go back on my word. That is my nindo. Naruto looked at her, grinning confidently and nodding. After Hinata nodded and gave a small smile, Naruto and Hinata turned to face the sun as it sank below the horizon. He looked at Hinata from the corner of his eye after she rested her head on his shoulder for a while. She was taken aback when he smiled and put an arm around her, but they soon warmed up and carried on admiring the sunset. But Hinata had no idea that someone was watching them. The lower portion of the person's face revealed that they were gritting their teeth in hatred, while the upper portion was obscured by the tree's shadow. Soon after, though, he or she jumped off. Naruto narrowed his eyes and looked to where he or she had been a moment before. As soon as Hinata realized Naruto was preoccupied, she glanced in his direction but saw nothing. Curious and worried, Hinata questioned, What's wrong, Naruto-kun? After a moment of more staring, Naruto turned to face Hinata and grinned, saying, Nothing. Having said that, they both turned around at sunset, oblivious to the impending danger. The council room. In front of the Konoha's Jonin, Hiruzen Sarutobi sat behind a long table that curved, with Kaharu Utatane and Homura Mitokado, two of his trusted advisors, seated behind him. The words, Fire, were inscribed on the Hokage's hat, which lay before him. Hiruzen told everyone in the room, as some of you may already be aware or have heard, Naruto Uzumaki killed one villager and injured several others 2 days ago. With the exception of Kakashi, Asuma, and Guy, many of the Jonin gasped in shock and surprise. Naruto killed someone? A shocked Jonin inquired. No way! Exclaimed another. With a worried tone, the Tokubetsu Jonin Enko Mitarashi questioned, It must be the Nine Tails influence. Has the fourth Hokage's seal broken? Enko's eyes are light brown and lack pupils. She has a short, slightly spiky ponytail on her violet hair. She was dressed in a fitted mesh bodysuit that ran from her neck to her thighs and a tan overcoat. Given that her body is visible underneath, the mesh appears to be somewhat transparent. She has on a dark orange skirt, shin guards, a headband, and a tiny pendant. To make it more difficult to tear off in battle, the pendant is fastened to a sturdy cord rather than a chain. She turned to face Kakashi, who said, Fortunately, no Enko, it did. Then he turned to the Hokage as he said, Correct Kakashi. The seal on Naruto that contains the Nine Tails is not broken. However, the seal did loosen, but only slightly enough for him to use 1 tail's worth of its power. So for the moment, the Nine Tails is still trapped inside Naruto. Speaking for the other Jonin, a female Jonin questioned what caused this to happen. Hiruzen let out a sigh and said, according to Hinata Hyuga, Naruto, who was looking for some company, asked Sakura to hang out with him. She refuses, but he is quite a persistent person. She snapped and lashed out at him and berated him, crushing his will and his heart. Many listened as he went on, saddened by what they heard. She then leaves him there, devastated. Regrettably, some of the villagers saw the whole scene and took advantage of the situation. They mocked and laughed at him in his fragile state. He eventually snapped, and in his rage, he unleashed the 9 Tails chakra. It formed into what Hinata described as a cloak of aura that engulfed him, and some of it shaped into 2 ears and a tail. He then attacked the villagers, only showing enough mercy to leave them alive except for one. What do you mean, Hokage? Sama? Enko asked as many people looked at him in confusion. He only killed one of the villagers and spared the others. Hinata said that the one he killed was the one that tried to kill him. The others were probably only ignoring or shunned him or whispering about him. The only one that was left unharmed was the witness, Hinata Hyuga. Since he killed and injured those villagers without hesitation, many were taken aback. Why did the boy spare young Hinata? Was it because she was the heir of the Hyuga's main house? Kaharu asked in a bewildered tone. Hiruzen looked at her and replied, no, Kaharu. He spared her because she does not know why the villagers shunned him. She accidentally knocked over a broom in the alleyway she was observing him from, which startled him. He pounced on her, but when he saw who it was, he stopped. If it had been anyone else, he would probably have at very least injured him or her. What course of action should we take? Homura asked, turning to face him. Hiruzen responded by turning to him. For now, we'll keep him under control and try not to upset him more than he is. I have assigned someone to befriend him and keep his anger at bay. Kaharu inquired, who is this person you speak of, Hiruzen? He said, glancing at her, Hinata Hyuga. Is that wise, Hiruzen? Why do you not simply place the boy under watch by the Anbu, then put the child that close to an unstable Jinchuriki? Why put the young girl in harm's way? Homura asked, sparking a lot of gasps in the room. Hiruzen turned to him following his words. I understand what you're saying, old friend, but that won't solution the situation here. Naruto is a boy who is lonely and misunderstood. What he needs is a friend, a companion who acknowledges and believes in him. No? With that, I believe that she might win Naruto's trust and maybe his heart along with it, which can allow her to calm his hatred of the villagers and shinobi of Konoha. In the past, before they entered the academy, he rescued her for some bullies and she has since admired him. However, if it does not work, I have 2 other people I know that can do it. Others were curious, so a Jonin asked, who are the other 2? Hiruzen raised more questions when he said, sadly, I can't announce who they are at the moment. It's for their protection, but Homura and Kaharu were also aware of who he was referring to. But if the time comes, the truth will be told. Besides, I asked Kakashi here earlier today to keep eye on Naruto and Hinata to make sure nothing else happens. I plan to have a talk with Naruto later today to learn more about what happened. In the meantime, I ask that all of you to treat Naruto with kindness and respect. The last thing we need is a repeat of the incident 2 days ago, or one much worse. The idea made some of the Jonin swallow uneasily, but everyone nodded in agreement. In an instant, Konoha could be leveled by the 9 Tails power. They have to be extremely careful to avoid the worst. In an unidentified place, around an oval table, a number of people were seated. There were a few civilians among the many shinobi. Around the table, every seat except one was occupied. The group was reviewing the recent events involving Naruto. I can't believe this has happening. The 9 Tails has begun to regain its power. What are we going to do? A member of the group wept. He's right, someone else said, we can't let him live any longer now that he's awakened his powers. We have to eliminate the 9 Tails before he gains more of his powers back and destroys us all. The same person who had spied on the pair said, I strongly agree, at the entrance, drawing everyone's attention. He proceeded to sit down and say, now is the time to strike. The third was foolish for letting the boy live when we should have just killed him. Now, he is a danger to us all. He has corrupted the Hyuga heiress into liking him. We must move quickly if Konoha is to survive. The time has come to finish what the 4th has started. Tonight, we will destroy the 9 Tails and save this village from its evil clutches. After tonight, everyone will know us as the saviors of Konohagakure and the shinobi world. Cheers of celebration and agreement then filled the entire room. At this, the leader grinned. Thus, our departed friends and family will be retributed, and we won't have to cope with the 9 Tails brat anymore. Someone raised the worry, but what if the Hyuga girl gets involved? The man let out a sigh and said, "Well, if we can't free her from his brainwashing, we will have no choice but to kill the young heiress, regardless of her status. This has to be done." Once the sun had set, Hinata and Naruto parted ways separately. While Naruto went to Ichiraku for some ramen, Hinata went back to her house. She said she had something to do at home, so she turned down his offer to treat her. She said she was looking forward to seeing him at her house later. After that, Naruto left for some ramen at Ramen Ichiraku. "Please, I would like to order 3 bowls of miso ramen," Naruto said as he sat down at Ichiraku. With a smile on his face, Tucci said, "Ah, Naruto, you're back." After a small laugh, Naruto lamented, "Yeah, sorry about not stopping by, something happened to me recently." Tucci recognized the expression and understood what he meant. Some people told him and Ayame about Naruto's actions. "Ah, don't worry about it. It just Ayame was a little worried about you. I'm glad you're alright though," he said, smiling and waving it off, knowing that he and his daughter knew he simply needed to release some pent-up energy. Naruto raised his head and grinned slightly, "Thanks, Gigi." "Hey Ayame, whip up 3 bowls for Naruto, will you?" Tucci shouted as he turned to face Ayame. Then, "What? Naruto? Coming right up Tosen," Ayame yelled back in shock. Ayame showed up with a bowl of ramen after they had been waiting for a few minutes. With the bowl in front of him, Ayame exclaimed, "Naruto, where have you been? I was so worried about you." "Sorry Ayame. I've been rethinking about a few things later," Naruto said, laughing uneasily. Ayame asked, "What happened?" as she gave him a worried look. He told them about Sakura's situation and how Hinata liked him while he was eating his ramen. He stuffed his belly, said goodbye to them, and headed for Hinata's house, only to be confronted by an Anbu. The Anbu said, "Naruto Uzumaki, the Hokage requests your presence in his office," and then disappeared. After letting out a groan, Naruto made his way to the Hokage residence. Fantastic. Now, what does he want? Office of the Hokage. A knock on the door interrupted Hiruzen Sarutobi as he was reading a document. He replied, "Enter." Naruto appeared with a neutral expression on his face as the door opened. Hiruzen gave the person he wished to see a smile. "Ah Naruto, good to see you." Naruto questioned angrily, "What is it you wanted to see for, old man?" Hiruzen grinned at this. At least Naruto still has some of his former self. Hiruzen smiled and rested his chin against his fisted hands. "Well, I wanted to know what happened between your transformation and Sakura little stunt. And I see Hinata has lifted some of your spirits a bit," he said. Naruto laughed and replied, "Hinata did say you told her about the 9 tails. After what she saw me do, I can't blame her for wanting to know." The third nodded and grinned, then motioned for him to begin. "Well." With a sigh, Naruto resolved to end this matter at last. "Well, after Sakura left me there, I retreated to my subconscious where I met the 9 tails." The fact that Hiruzen encountered the tailed beast so early in life shocked him greatly. "So, you met the 9 tails? Did she talk to you?" Naruto questioned. You knew the 9 tails was female, since he was unaware that anyone was aware of her gender. "Yes, I did. Only a few people know the true gender of the 9 tails. I learned it from the first Hokage who was one of my teachers." "Now what did she tell you?" Hiruzen said, laughing at the expression on Naruto's face. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto remarked, "Not much besides she is going to train me on certain things since nobody is willing to teach me anything." Naruto went on, "I also couldn't help but notice that she mentioned that I was her newest Jinchuriki. Who was the former Jinchuriki of the 9 tails before me?" Hiruzen was genuinely shocked by this and was about to express his thoughts on the subject. Hiruzen began to perspire a bit before exhaling deeply and letting out a sigh. "I was hoping to tell you when you were older, but with what has happened lately, you deserve to know. It was your mother, Kushina Uzumaki. She was the second 9 tails Jinchuriki and the first's wife, Mito Uzumaki, was the 9 tails first Jinchuriki." What he just said caused Naruto to gasp in surprise and shock. "What, Kachan was the 9 tails Jinchuriki before me?" With his eyes closed, Hiruzen nodded and said, "Yes, Naruto, she was." "Can you tell me what happened to my parents, old man?" Naruto said, his eyes downcast. Hiruzen looked at Naruto with little sympathy while leaning his face against his fisted hands. He hoped this wouldn't have to occur so quickly. Before Naruto found out the truth about his parents, he wanted him to develop and mature a bit more. He believed Naruto was not yet prepared to deal with the fallout from the events of 8 years ago. "I'm sorry, Naruto, but I can't tell you just yet. You are not old enough for me to tell you the truth," the third said, closing his eyes. The elderly Hokage was looking at Naruto sadly. Said, I'll tell you about your mother when you graduate from the academy and become a genin, but your father will have to wait until you become chunin at the very least. Please understand that you are just not ready to know this information just yet. However, I will tell that your mother and father were great shinobi and loved you very much. So much so, that they gave their lives for you. Is that all you want to hear from me, Hokage? Sama? Asked Naruto, grinning slightly. With a nod and a smile, Hiruzen said, yes, you may go now. When the Hokage said, oh, one more thing Naruto. Just, be careful around the 9 tails. She is not the most friendly or most trustworthy of beings. And try not to use the 9 tails chakra again unless it's a life or death situation. Okay. Naruto bowed and left, but was stopped at the door. At that, Naruto grinned and laughed out loud, saying, you're right about that, old man. Do not worry. I will be careful, and I'll try not to. With a sincere smile from Hiruzen, Naruto departed and shut the door behind him. Minato, you should be extremely proud of your son. He is maturing quickly and becoming more and more like you every day. All I can hope for is that Kushina will wake up soon. When I inform Naruto that his mother is still alive, albeit undoubtedly in a coma, and that he has a twin sister, I just hope he won't be overly upset. Away from the Hyuga clan home, he went to Hinata's house to work and study with her after speaking with Hiruzen. When he felt threatened, he nearly made it to the front gate. A metal pole struck him in the back after he jumped out of the way to avoid a flurry of kunai. With a groan, he collapsed to his knees after gasping in agony. He slowly scanned his surroundings and saw that he was surrounded by 6 villagers and 6 chunin. The villager with the metal pipe asked angrily and malevolently, where do you think you're going, 9 tails? With a growl, Naruto took aim at them and said, what's going on here? What do you want? I got somewhere I need to be. One of the more haughty, tenacious chunin with a sword said, after tonight, the 9 tails will gone forever, sorry, but we let you leave 9 tails. After the scene you made 2 days ago, some of us felt you're too dangerous to keep alive anymore since you've regained some of your powers. When the others expressed agreement, Naruto let out a deep growl. Apologies, Gigi. It appears that I will have to renege on that pledge. Then he stood up, lowering his face and growling angrily. Before long, red chakra began to surge all around him. Then he lifted his head, revealing his vertical pupil, feral red eyes and the thickened and widened whisker, like smudges on his cheeks. With the chakra of the 9 tails blazing, Naruto crossed his clawed hands in front of him, palms facing his enemies, and screamed angrily. Shut up! It's people like you I cannot tolerate anymore, you rotten bastards. I may be the host of the 9 tails, but I am not the 9 tails. You just can't get over your hatred for what she did that night and your fear for something you don't understand. Office of the Hokage. Hiruzen was working on some paperwork when the familiar evil aura suddenly materialized, and he gasped. He was aware that it could only indicate that Naruto had been attacked or enraged and was once more utilizing the 9 tails power. He paused and peered through one of his office's windows. There's no denying this sensation. It is the 9 tails chakra. Hiruzen pondered while gazing out the window. God damn it. I told them to stop bothering him. The village may not make it through this time. Away from the Hyuga clan home, Kakashi arrives on the scene after sensing the chakra of the 9 tails being released. He landed on the roof of a house that had a view of the impending fight. Before things worsened, Kakashi knew he had to put an end to this. He was about to move when he sensed someone standing behind him. I won't let you interfere, Kakashi, a low-pitched voice said. Kakashi attempted to turn around but was sliced in the neck before he could respond. He managed to turn enough to catch a glimpse of the individual. Before the darkness took over, all he could make out was a hazy picture of a man with long, spiked black hair and a mask. The man had shoulder-length, blue, tinted black hair that was long and spiky. He had an orange mask on his face, with an eye hole on the left side and a pattern of flames across it. A luminous Sharingan eye was briefly gazing at the unconscious Kakashi through the eye hole. He knocked out the copy ninja and then turned to watch the impending battle. Let's see what Naruto Uzumaki is capable of now. This could be my opportunity to reclaim what is mine. The tenacious Chunin, who appeared to be the leader, hurled, enough, no more words. Tonight the world will be rid of you, demon. Our friends, families, and comrades will be avenged. The others gave Naruto a round of applause before charging at him. With a shout, Naruto pushed his fist forward, launching a chakra blast at some of the crowd that only managed to knock 2 villagers back. After that, he sighed, kicked away from the Chunin with the sword after he swung at him 3 times and elbowed him in the back, blocked two villagers' punches before roundhouse kicking them, and avoided a Chunin's kick before kneeing him in the gut and side, kicking him. A Chunin grabbed him by the waist from behind, so he leaned back, used his legs to stop the Chunin in front of him, and pushed him away. He then spun upside down, palmed the Chunin in the face, and kicked and punched the rest away. The mob's leader had had enough and leapt back, going over some hand signals. Lightning release. Electromagnetic murder. His hands created a surge of electricity that blasted towards Naruto. As the electric current flowed through his body, Naruto let out a cry of agony. Two Konoha Chunin also passed through some hand seals after spotting an opening. Great fireball technique for fire release, wind release, great breakthrough. The blonde boy, who was shocked by the previous technique, was hit by a huge fireball. By using the wind release technique, the fireball grew hotter and more powerful, which in turn helped it expand. Naruto had no opportunity to get out of the way as the fireball engulfed him. You could hear Naruto screaming for miles. A very weak and severely burned Naruto was left standing in the center of a sizable scotch mark, hunched over in agony, as the technique gradually came to an end. The other members of the mob saw their opportunity and started beating Naruto, who was having trouble staying upright. After charging a kunai with fire chakra, one Chunin slashed down on the right side of his face, almost destroying his eye. With slitted blue eyes, Naruto gazed at him before kicking him away. After attempting to stand, Naruto collapsed onto one knee. The leader then approached Naruto, grabbed him by the rumple of his shirt, and then stabbed him in the abdomen with his sword. As the Chunin applied lightning chakra to the sword, he let out a cry of pain that spread throughout his body. Shortly after, Naruto lost his savage demeanor and the Chunin withdrew the sword and smiled triumphantly. He glared weakly at the man and said, "Justice will be delivered at last. Go to hell, 9. Tails," as he was ready to strike Naruto in the heart. Everyone turned when they heard the sound of running footsteps and saw Hinata leap into the air, soaring at them while pulling back her arm. While the crowd gazed at her without emotion, Naruto stared in shock and disbelief. When Hinata smashed her palm first into the ground exploded, leaving a crater in her wake. "Ha!" she cried, thrusting her palm forward, causing the Chunin to drop Naruto, who then jumped or ran back with the others. When Hinata heard the fighting and saw the enormous fireball, she rushed as quickly as she could after hearing Naruto scream. After a moment of staring at the battered Naruto, Hinata turned to glare at the crowd. How unkind. They tried to kill him after beating and stabbing him until he was too weak to defend himself. With a serious tone, Hinata screamed, "I won't let you hurt Naruto-kun anymore." The mob leader gave her a raised eyebrow. "What is this? Why are you doing here? Get away quickly. You're no match for," Naruto screamed as he glanced up at Hinata. Hinata nodded and said, "I know," which made Naruto gasp in surprise. "I'm just being selfish." "What are you talking about? Don't put yourself in dangers like this," Naruto snapped back, glaring at her. Hinata remarked, "I'm here because I want to be," as she gazed at the crowd she was facing. "This time, I'm going to save you, Naruto-kun." Naruto gazed at her in shock and incredulity. She smiled for a second, then switched to the gentle fist style. The crowd formed combat positions and readied themselves to engage in combat with her. Her Byakugan activated slowly, and the leader narrowed his eyes. "Fine, then. We'll take you down first, demon whore." He was not at all put off by her sneering at him. "Back away. I'll deal with this little wrench myself," he said, turning to the other. They backed up to observe after nodding. He assumed a taijutsu stance and sheathed his sword. Running forward, she attempted to hit his chakra points. Unfortunately, he outpaced her in speed and was able to avoid every blow with ease. Despite taking some hits, she continued to return with a vengeance. He eventually decided to stop playing this game because he was getting bored. He stumbled as he tried to kick her after stepping on a loose stone. She took advantage of the opportunity and hit him in the stomach. The others, including Naruto, gasped in shock. The Chunin let out a cry of agony and retreated a short distance. The Chunin regained his composure and, filled with rage, dropped down and kicked Hinata hard in the gut, sending her flying into the air. She then went for the chest. As she plummeted toward the ground, Naruto watched in horror. "Hinata!" he cried in terror as she crashed to the ground. For a long time, Naruto silently and horrifiedly gazed at the fallen Hinata. He regained consciousness and began frantically calling her name in desperation. As she lay there still, Naruto screamed in anguish, "Hinata! Hinata! Hey! Damn it, Hinata!" Her eyes opened slowly, and she took a deep breath. "Hinata!" Naruto exclaimed, startled and relieved. Hinata approached him slowly and feebly. She kept going until she found herself facing Naruto. As she sobbed and frantically attempted to shield him, tears fell from her eyes. Naruto begged and turned away, saying in a strained, anguished voice, "Stop," because he could no longer stand to watch her struggle. "Hinata, get away." After taking a hit to the stomach, she attempted to attack once more but collapsed. She crawled shakily to him, too weak to walk any longer. With tears in his eyes, Naruto gazed at her before lowering his head in sorrow and closing them. As she struggled to her feet and turned to face the Chunin with the sword, the crowd looked on in confusion. The leader said, "I don't understand," as he couldn't figure anything out. "Why are you trying so hard to protect that monster? Why fight us, knowing you will die if you do?" With her face hidden, Hinata's hands gripped tightly as she said, "I never go back on my word." When Naruto recalled those words, he gasped. When he announced that he would be collaborating with her, he informed her of this. Slowly, with surprise and sadness, he glanced up at her. She slowly cocked her head to the side and gave Naruto a weary look in return. "Because that's my Nindo too," she said, her smile feeble. Naruto gazed at her in complete astonishment and incredulity. Then he watched in horror as the Chunin grabbed her by the neck, kicked her into the wall of the compound, leaving a crater in it, lifted her up, and pulled her away. Naruto gazed in disbelief and rage at his actions. After drawing his sword, the man stabbed her in the chest. As her lifeless body fell to the ground and blood began to gather around her, Naruto looked on in distress. "Stupid little wrench, should have stay out of our business. Oh, do not look so horrified." 9. Tails. You killed so many people the day you attacked our village, our friends, our families, and even our fourth Hokage, so this should not faze you. Hey Ruasu, I think you went too far there, man. Hiyashi Sama might come after your head for this, declared one Chunin. Shut up, you weak-minded fool. She was a weak heir to begin with. Besides us doing the village and the Hyuga clan a favor, he has another daughter anyway. Shot back the man who was now known as Ruasu. The others agreed with a shout. That he kept staring at Hinata's dead body. As the pain in Naruto's heart grew, it transformed into rage and agony. Naruto became furious and his blood began to boil like magma when he heard the comment that Hinata was weak and that she was being disposed of as a favor to the village. His entire set of eyes turned red in a flash, with the iris slitting and expanding outwards and then disappearing after a brief period of redness. The sound of a single heartbeat reverberated throughout his mind as this was going on. He then let out a cry of pain and rage, which eventually transformed into a scream of unadulterated rage. The scream that rocked the entire village was followed by a violent explosion that blasted them back before they could take any action. Their faces needed to be protected from the wind and debris. The sudden explosion and the gust it caused many people within a few miles of the fight to scream in fear. The crowd of villagers lowered their arms and stared in disbelief at a sphere of dark purple chakra surrounded by a medium-sized crater and a stream of black smoke that stretched into the sky. The explosion had damaged many of the buildings around them. Astonished, one said, "What is that? Office of the Hokage." "Hokage Sama," a group of Anbu said as they entered the room. Hiruzen, wearing a ninja helmet, a Konoha forehead protector bandana with long straps, a gauntlet on his right arm, and a black jumpsuit with gray shoulder armor, had already sensed the explosion and the vile chakra that followed. He yelled, "I know, Anbu, follow me. We have to stop this before it gets out of hand," and they both agreed. The chakra of the 9. Tails soared once more. There's a difference from the previous time. It is far more evil and more powerful. How could Naruto have been able to use this much of its power? Away from the Hyuga clan home, the man in the mask looked to his side and grinned evilly at the scene. My, this is an interesting turn of events, wouldn't you agree, Zetsu?" he said. Next to the man in the mask, a huge Venus flytrap emerged from the roof and towered over the lower half of a man, clad in a black cloak patterned with red clouds. When the flytrap opened, a head with short green hair and yellow eyes was visible, along with two distinct colored halves. The right half is black, and the left is entirely white. Indeed, was uttered by both halves as the man known as Zetsu grinned. The fiery chakra sphere abruptly cooled down, revealing a humanoid creature crouching on all fours in Naruto's place. The creature had an orange outline and was blood red with black streaks swirling into it. Its face resembled a black mask, and its mouth and eyes were glowing white and empty. It had clawed hands and mostly orange feet. However, its 4 long red tails swooping around behind it and the 2 long, pointy red ears on top of its head were its most striking and eye-widening features. Its outline was blazed with red chakra. The boy they were attempting to kill, in the 9. tailed demon fox's miniature form, crouched in front of them. They were horrified by a familiar sound that it made after staring at them with now evilly sneering hallowed eyes. Like the nine tails, it was the growl. Then it got to its feet and let loose the nine tails' terrifying roar, which reverberated several miles away from the battle. A frightening chakra swept through the entire village. Many of the shinobi and villagers who sensed it looked fearfully in the direction of origin. Anyone who recalls the events of 8 years ago can identify it. It was the chakra of the nine tails. Many began to question whether the nine tails had gotten past the seal and were now attacking the village once more. The third Hokage, dressed in an armored black jumpsuit, was racing toward the scene with Chunin level or higher shinobi. For their own safety, civilians were instructed to remain in their homes. The final member of the Uchiha clan and his pink-haired admirer were racing to the scene to witness what was happening, despite the danger, but nobody noticed them because everyone was too busy. Sasuke reflected on the beginning of this. Rewind. Sakura suddenly appeared as Sasuke was making his way back to a training field to continue practicing the shuriken technique. Sasuke-kun, she exclaimed, sprinting towards him. Where you off to? Glaring at her, Sasuke answered. The training fields. Why would you care? Sakura dragged her left foot back and forth while holding her hands behind her back and looking down anxiously. Well, I was wondering if we could hang out together. Then Sakura raised her head and gazed at him, hoping he would concur. Sasuke said as he closed his eyes and turned to leave, not interested. Sakura slumped back in denial. Sakura let out a startled scream as a loud explosion sent a shockwave of wind and debris flying. Sakura and Sasuke shielded their faces with their hands. Like many of the villagers, they both lowered their hands and gazed at the stream of black smoke shooting into the sky after the shockwave passed. Sasuke said, what was that?" to no one in particular. In response, Sakura said, I'm not sure. The two became uneasy as a dreadful aura of murderous intent and bloodlust filled the air. The villagers who had previously experienced the feeling began to panic around them. One of the villagers exclaimed in horror, "Oh no, the seal has broken, the nine tails has been freed." Another exclaimed, "The fourth Hokage's last trump card has failed, the nine tails has returned. We are all going to die." Just before another villager struck him in the back of the head. "Shut up, you fools. Do not forget we have Hokage Sama here to protect us. We have to have faith that he will protect this village just like the fourth did years ago." Sasuke and Sakura were very concerned and perplexed after hearing what they had to say. In the Ninja Academy a few weeks ago, they were discussing the nine-tailed demon fox that had attacked the village 8 years prior. At the expense of his life, the fourth Hokage was said to have vanquished the nine tails and preserved the village. Now Sasuke began to suspect that it might be a lie. It might have been sealed off and now escaped. Before he ran off to the scene of the explosion, he thought, I'll have to see for myself. Sakura was startled when she noticed Sasuke sprinting toward the explosion. Then she hurried after him. Sakura yelled, "Sasuke-kun, where are you going?" as she trailed closely behind him. Sasuke gave her another look before answering. "I'm going to see what's happening over there, where else?" What he had just said left Sakura speechless. What, you cannot be serious, did you not hear what the villagers were saying? The nine tails may have returned. We're only academy students, what can we do against something like that? With a snort, Sasuke looked ahead. The villagers could be wrong, you know, anything could have caused that. Therefore, I am going to check it out. I cannot let something like that scare me off. Sasuke glared at her and said, and besides, if you're so scared, why are you following me? She flinched. She partially lied and fixed him with a determined gaze, saying, and wherever you go, I am going, too. I would like to see this for myself as well. Sasuke said, humph. Whatever, because he didn't give a damn about what she did. After that, they both kept their attention on moving in the direction of the explosion site. Flashback end. Sakura was still keeping up with him despite being a little tired, as Sasuke noticed when he glanced over his shoulder. He looked straight and snorted. He doesn't give a damn about why she followed him. He will put up with her for the time being as long as she doesn't annoy him or obstruct his path. A girl their age was also making her way to the explosion site a few yards away. She had a round face, violet eyes, fair skin, and crimson hair that reached her lower back. Her outfit consisted of a yellow kimono, a short, sleeved mesh shirt, dark blue shorts, a green obi, and brown standard shinobi sandals. The same clothes Kushina used to wear as a child. She was on her way to the Konoha hospital to see her mother, who has spent the last 8 years in a coma, when the village was shocked by a massive explosion that was followed by a terrifying roar. She went to investigate the explosion site because she was worried that the village was being attacked and that her unconscious mother might be in danger. She finally saw Sakura and Sasuke after a short while. She yelled, "Hey, what are you two doing out here?" And the two stopped, turning to face her. "Don't you know the village is under attack?" Sasuke snored indifferently as he glanced at her. "Who cares, I just want to see what is going on. Who are you anyway?" With a tone of annoyance, the girl responded, "Well, Uchiha. My name is Nariko Uzumaki Databasu." Sakura's eyes widened in surprise at the girl's last name, and Sasuke gave her a somewhat surprised look. They believed that there was only one Uzumaki, Naruto. They did remember, though, that some of the academy's students had mentioned a girl named Uzumaki, who was a year older than them. They claimed that a number of children were making fun of her due to her red hair and round face. She resembled an overripe tomato, they said. Later, they were discovered battered to a bloody pulp. A lot of people began referring to her as the red hot blooded habanero. They claimed that she frequently uses a silly catchphrase akin to Naruto's when she is agitated, excited, or flustered, something she only recently admitted was true. Sakura asked again out of curiosity, "Uzumaki? You wouldn't happen to be related to Naruto Uzumaki, would you?" Nariko looked shocked. "What? You mean there is another Uzumaki in this village? But, Hokage. Sama told me that my mother and I were the only ones in the Konohagakure no Sato." Looking at each other, the two were taken aback by this. She and her mother were the only Uzumaki in the village. The third Hokage informed her. The Hokage would lie about that, but why? Further questions were also raised by this. Sakura and Nariko gave Sasuke a perplexed look when he asked, "Say Nariko, when were you born?" I was born on October 10th, why?" she asked, utterly confused by the situation. Sakura gasped and put her hands to her mouth as Sasuke's eyes widened in surprise. She and Naruto were born on the same day. They both asked themselves, "Who is this girl?" Their responses were beginning to worry and frighten Nariko. What's wrong? Why are you staring at me like that? You're scaring me." Sakura uttered the words, "N. Nariko, that is the same day Naruto was born," in utter shock. Nariko's eyes enlarged with surprise and incredulity. On the same day that she was born, a boy named Naruto, who is also a member of the Uzumaki clan, was born. Absolutely not. You can't do that. Is he the one? In complete surprise, she thought. Sakura nodded slowly when Nariko said, "Why? Your name is Sakura, right? Can you tell me what he looks like?" Sakura started to say, well, he has spiky blonde hair, blue eyes, and has. But Nariko cut her off, and she finished it for her while crying. 3 whisker marks on both of his cheeks. After exchanging glances, Sakura and Sasuke reluctantly nodded. Yes. Nariko's tears grew as she saw them nod. Something on her cheeks caught their attention. 3 whisker-like marks were showing through the makeup that seemed to be removed by her tears. Naruto's cheeks looked exactly like them. Then they both knew it was true. She is the sister of Naruto. Even her name is similar to his. Nariko sobbed and fell to her knees. "It's really him. He is my twin brother." She wept as she buried her face in her fingers. "The Hokage told me that he died during the 9 Tails attack on Konoha 8 years ago. Why did he lie to me? He knew my brother was alive all this time and he just lied to me saying he died?" To soothe her, Sakura knelt next to her and gave her a back rub, saying, I'm sure he had his reasons. Shush, don't cry." She had previously thought of Naruto as a gifted fool who was purposefully attempting to destroy her life and obstruct her attempts to win Sasuke's affection. She was now beginning to regret what she had done to Naruto. She was aware that Naruto had no parents or siblings, was alone, had no friends, and was reprimanded by the adults for no apparent reason, but she never stopped to think about it. She treated him like trash and was just like everyone else. She merely hoped that if she apologized, he would still forget her. Sasuke was taken aback by everything. That the student he occasionally refers to as the loser in class had a sibling he was unaware of. He felt something inside of him, but he had no idea why. His heart was hurting. The last time it hurt this much was when his older brother destroyed the Uchiha clan. His blood boiled at the mere thought of him. For what reason did the Hokage tell her that she had no brother? What does this all mean? He shook his head and made the decision to consider this later. He needed to know what was going on right now. Sasuke assuredly said, "Nariko, we'll have a talk with the Hokage later," attracting Sakura and Naruko's attention. "Right now, we need to find out what happened over there. It's possible maybe Naruto is over there, too. Sakura instantly became aware of this and nodded in agreement. Then she assisted Nariko in standing up. Nariko looked resolutely at Sasuke after wiping the tears from her eyes and regaining her composure, then she said, "Right." With a nod, Sasuke looked ahead and said, "Well, let's go then." Mindscape. When the nine Tails sensed Naruto's rage rising deep within her subconscious, she opened her eyes. Knowing what was going to happen next, she chuckled evilly and smiled giddy. Hee, boy, those fools have crossed the line this time, to have Naruto draw on this much of my chakra. Then, at that, she laughed again. After things cool down, I'll start Naruto's training. And when I'm done with him, the whole village will be begging for forgiveness and that masked man will die for what he's done. Then she laughed deeply, and it reverberated throughout his subconscious. Away from the Hyuga clan home, Naruto rose with a growl, and several chakra torsos erupted from him. Then, with a swoop of its claws, one of them arose, forming a tornado that headed in the direction of the Chunin traders. Some were not so fortunate, but Ruasu and a few others jumped out of the way. The fierce winds severely damaged some of the Chunin that were in its path. The tornado quickly died, and the victims fell to the ground, dead. Ruasu landed with the remnants of his followers in a crouch and grinned haughtily. "Humph! Is that the best you got?" After the torso transformed back into Naruto, he roared and slammed his hands into the ground, which began to shatter. When Ruasu looked down, he noticed that the ground beneath him had begun to crack. As soon as he realizes, he jumps away, and others do the same. A pair of deep red chakra arms emerge from the ground. As Naruto looks at them, a number of arms emerge from one of them and rush in the direction of the traders. They started avoiding it after glancing back to see it. Some of the traders were not as fortunate, as they were captured by the arms and turned to ash. At this, Naruto squints, smiles evilly, and growls with delight at their screams. Ruasu was coming straight at him, but he didn't even realize it until his fist struck him in the face. Despite being stunned by his blow, Naruto sprang to his feet and squatted down, then snarled and charged at him. Unsheathing his sword, Ruasu confronted him. During his backward flip, he leaned back beneath Naruto's swipe and struck him in the side with his leg, causing Naruto to roll a few meters away. Ruasu stabbed Naruto with his sword as he attempted to stand up, but despite his best efforts, the blade was unable to penetrate him. Naruto grabbed the sword with one of his tails during this time. Ruasu was taken aback by this and attempted to remove his sword, but Naruto gripped it tightly. Then, with his sword still in his tail's grasp, Naruto tossed him away with ease and used his tremendous strength to shatter the blade to pieces. Naruto crushed the hilt to powder by stomping on it after it fell to the ground. Ruasu charged blindly at him, furious that his sword had been destroyed, only to be elbowed in the back and punched in the gut. His right leg was then pulled out from under him, spun around twice, and thrown into a wooden fence by one of his tails, which caused the fence to crack. Leaping forward, Naruto used one of his tails to stab Ruasu in the chest before transforming into a block of wood. After giving a startled snarl, Naruto was kicked in the left side of his face, which caused him to fall sideways into the street. Then he rose slowly and roared at him. The majority of the Hyuga clan was unaware that they were observing Tails Naruto's conflict with the Chunin trader from the sidelines. Just before he transforms, they show up on the scene. Rewind. 5 Hyuga emerged from the compound to look into the disturbance after hearing the fight. Ko Hyuga, Hinata's bodyguard, was one of them. Ruasu stabbed Hinata as they got there, encircling her with a tiny pool of blood. "Hinata! Sama!" he exclaimed alarmingly. The Chunin was glared at by the others, who gasped at the sight. Naruto burst into his Tails form before they could strike back. The group hurried to Hinata as soon as the battle shifted away from her. Ko checked her wounds and sighed to himself. Ko told the others, her injuries aren't fatal, but she needs treatment immediately. One of them nodded, and the others went off to find a medical.nin. Hiyashi and the rest of the clan came as he was leaving. Before noticing Tails, Naruto and a Chunin fighting, Hiyashi hurried to Hinata's side and asked, "What happened here, Ko?" Ko described what he thought had transpired while he gazed at the altercation. Apparently, Naruto was coming over to study with Hinata. As he arrived, a mob of villagers and Chunin attacked him. Hinata soon came and tried to protect him. However, Kei's expressions turned sad and he faces Hiyashi. This man Naruto is currently fighting beat her badly, and then stabbed her in the chest. I believe Naruto thought he killed her, in which case he nearly did. Infuriated, Naruto then engulfed by the Tails chakra and grew 4 tails. Hiyashi nodded slowly and said, "I see," as he observed the conflict. Flashback end. Hinata muttered softly, but none of them heard. Naruto-kun. Naruto growled as he gazed at the Chunin. Then, with a roar, he rose to his feet, and chakra orbs that were light blue and black-red erupted from his body and spread out around him. Is that? Ruasu let out a startled gasp. Is that a chakra? The Hyuga pondered, and some of them turned on their Byakugan to get a close-up look. As the chakra starts to form a sphere in front of Naruto's open mouth, his tails curl over his head. After that, he compresses it, creating a shockwave that surrounds him like a tiny crater. Toby, who was watching the battle from the roof, gave Naruto a menacing smile as he prepared to do something. Things are beginning to get interesting. Half the village would be destroyed and I would be killed if I were struck by that high density chakra. Like most of the Hyuga there, Ruasu thought in shock. Then, as the weight of the condensed chakra causes Naruto's mouth to collapse to the ground, it rips open wider and swallows the chakra sphere. Many stared in disbelief at what he had just done. Some began to question what he would do now that he was restrained by that chakra. At that moment, Naruto's body grew into a ball, then grew a little more before bulging up around his neck and a stream began to emerge from his mouth. After that, he threw back his head and inhaled, making a whirring sound as the inside of his mouth glowed bright red. With his cheeks protruding and his mouth shut, he quickly snapped his head down before launching a huge chakra blast at the Chunin. But before Hiashi used the 8 trigrams palms revolving heaven, he leapt ahead of the attack and knocked Ruasu out. After a brief battle for supremacy, the tailed beast ball struck the spinning chakra dome, and the chakra blast bounced off the dome, over Naruto, and just missed the village wall. Everyone in attendance, including Naruto, is taken aback by this. There was a huge explosion in the mountains outside the village wall. Toby said, "Your Jinchuriki skills are most impressive." Naruto Uzumaki, behind Naruto, who was taken aback by the voice. Then he sees a man with long, spiked black hair wearing a mask. His eyes widen briefly as he sees the newcomer and instantly recognizes him. Then he snarls in rage and lunges at Toby. Then, avoiding a swipe with both hands, Toby kicks him in the face, sending him crashing into a building. "You'll have to do better than that, kid," Toby smirked behind his mask and taunted children. Soon after, Naruto leapt from the structure and landed a short distance from Toby. A red, glowing sphere with a dark purple core suddenly descended from the sky and exploded on Naruto. Naruto emerged from the smoke on all fours, surrounded by flaming red chakra, as the dust settled. As the 9 tails bones started to form from the intense chakra surrounding his body and attached to it with multiple thick chakra ligaments, his chakra abruptly spiked. He then had 6 tails after 2 more sprang out behind him. Naruto snarled at Toby and hurled chakra arms in his direction. Toby was surprised to find that he could easily outrun, block, and dodge them. Some even passed through his body without causing any harm. Toby then launched a counterattack, kicking him in the stomach to knock him out. Then Sakura, Sasuke, and Nariko showed up and landed on a building's roof just as Toby threw Naruto in that direction. Sasuke shouted in surprise, "Shit! Look out!" before the 3 of them jumped out of the building. They managed to flee before Naruto collides with the structure. Naruto attacks Toby with smaller scale, fast, firing chakra blasts a few seconds later. He resists the explosions that burst around him and passed through him. To his astonishment, Naruto then emerges from his left and punches him in the side of his mask, slightly shattering it. He rolled a yard, then hurried to his feet and jumped a few feet away. Toby grinned and mumbled, "Not bad, boy," before getting back up. "Not bad at all." With his back straight and his head tilted upward, Naruto snarls, his mouth slightly agape. Sasuke, Sakura, and Nariko watched in wonder and terror from a safe distance as the creature engaged the masked shinobi. They were afraid of the sensation the chakra was emitting. It was brimming with malice and bloodlust. The 3 of them looked at Naruto, trembling a little in terror, and asked themselves, "What is that thing? How is it possible for something with such a repulsive chakra to control it?" When Sarutobi and a few Anbu arrived and landed next to the Hyuga, Toby used his Sharingan to enter Naruto's subconscious. There, he saw Naruto with 6 tails, covered in 9 tailbones. Sarutobi gaped in amazement at Naruto's transformation. At the moment, he resembles a tiny 9 tails, only with 6 tails and a coat of bones. "Hiashi, what happened here?" he asked, turning to face Hiashi, who had watched the entire altercation. Apparently, a mob of villagers and Chunin confronted Naruto and attacked him. After severely beating him, they prepared to kill him to avenge their fallen friends and family from that night. Hiashi then turned his attention to his deceased daughter. That was when my daughter joined the fight and tried to save Naruto. She fought with all her strength, but she was no match for them. Ruasu then stabbed her in the chest, purposely missing her heart. Naruto, believing she was died, exploded into the 9 tails form with 4 tails. At that moment, the Hyuga who had gone to get a medical nin came back with 1, and the ninja started to tend to her injuries. Sarutobi gazed at Hinata, who was injured. It's exactly what I feared. Sarutobi said, so then, that was the trigger for his transformation, with a twinge of insight. Hiyashi turned back to the battle after nodding. Naruto then fought and killed all but Ruasu of the mob. Naruto was about to kill him and half of the village with a blast of condensed chakra when I stepped in and repelled the attack away from the village. Then, that masked man appeared behind him with what looked like some kind of space-time ninjutsu. The Anbu present shouted in surprise and bewilderment, "What? A space-time ninjutsu?" Hiyashi gave a nod and went on. Yes, and upon seeing him, Naruto attacked him with ferocity, but was outmaneuvered and knocked into a building. Anger even more, he grew 2 more tails and the skeleton of the 9 tails. After that, they have been battling it out. They both are evenly matched in strength and skill. Sarutobi turned to look at the man in the mask. You can't do that. The 4th Hokage was the only shinobi known to possess time space ninjutsu. How does he know one, and who is this man? Now existing in Naruto's mind, Tobi saw the Konoha.nin and the 3rd Hokage assembling. It dawned on him now that he had stayed too long. He laughed a little and looked back at Naruto. He lifted his left hand and waved it around his body before vanishing from sight. Well, it's been fun, kid, but it's time for me to go. One day, we will return and take the 9 tails from you. See ya, he said. He disappeared, and Naruto snarled in surprise. With a sneer on his face, he lowered his head in frustration before erupting in rage. In order to complete filming the entire altercation, Zetsu also vanished into the roof itself to a safer spot. Mindscape. With his head between his knees and his arms wrapped around them, Naruto sat in front of the 9 tails cell and sobbed softly. The image of Hinata being killed in front of him kept replaying in his mind. Why? Why did things have to turn out this way? He pondered. What made her sacrifice herself for me? When a figure that the 9 tails had not wanted to see for a few years entered, she was about to say something to her distraught Jinchuriki. She identified the man who entered as the one who had set her free and made her attack Konoha, which resulted in her being imprisoned in her former host's children. You, she snarled, so enraged that Naruto snapped out of it. Naruto, mourn later. We have an uninvited guest. Naruto stood up and turned around after giving the fox a slow glance. A man with long, spiky, shoulder-length black hair with a blue tint stood in front of them. He had an orange mask on his face, with an eye hole on the left side and a pattern of flames across it. As he glanced from Naruto to the 9 tails and back again, the man said, "Hello Naruto Uzumaki. You can call me Tobi. I see the 9 tails has taken a liking to you. Don't get used to it, brat, because she is mine and I will redistribute what your father took from me. Why, you arrogant little bastard, if I wasn't locked behind this gate, I would be marching over there and ripping you to pieces." The demon fox growled at him, roared, and slammed its tail against the cell's bars before yelling angrily, "As much as I hate the 4th for sealing me again, in a child no less, you are on my list of people I detest with a passion. Second only to Madara Uchiha." Naruto was stunned. By saying the 4th, the 9 tails confirmed Toba's claim that his father had sealed the 9 tails inside of him. My dad is the 4th Hokage. Is it true? The 4th Hokage is my father and he was the one who sealed you inside me? Naruto said, turning to face the 9 tails. With a sigh, the 9 tails said, "Yes Naruto. He is your father. You are the son of Konoha's Yellow Flash and also the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze and the Red Hot Blooded Habanero, Kushina Uzumaki, my former Jinchuriki." Her stern expression softened as she turned back to him. He was initially shocked, but after a while he became very happy and began to cry happy tears. He felt a little irate because his father had put him through so much hardship. Toba's body dissolved and withdrew from the boy's thoughts. "We will meet again someday, and do not forget, I will be watching you Naruto. And the 9 tails will be mine again," he said. "By the way Naruto, you can stop calling me 9 tails in front of me. My real name is Kurama, given to me by the Six Paths Sage." 9 tails said as Tobi walked away. Naruto gave a sorrowful nod. "Hey, cheer up, brat. There is a possibility that Hinata might still be alive," Kurama said coolly when he noticed this. As Kurama went on, Naruto turned to face her again and said, "In the meantime, Let's start your training for the time being. Naruto nodded and grinned after his eyes widened. Mindscape's end, now existing in Naruto's mind, Tobi saw the Konoha.nin gathering and the third Hokage himself. It dawned on him now that he had stayed too long, after his unsuccessful attempt to apprehend the nine. Tails, destroy Konoha so quickly, and expose himself as much as he did, he had no intention of returning to Konoha. But he came to see it for himself after learning from Zetsu about the recent events involving the new nine. Tails' Jinchuriki. He believed that this might be another opportunity to capture the nine. Tails. He had to acknowledge that it was worthwhile to come out publicly. The boy will eventually come and look for him now that he is aware of the truth about the nine. Tails' attack on Konoha and who was responsible for it. He laughed a little and looked back at Naruto. He lifted his left hand and waved it around his body before vanishing from sight. Well, it's been fun, kid, but it's time for me to go. One day, we will return and take the nine. Tails from you. See ya, he said. As he disappeared, Naruto jumped to where he had been and looked for him, gaping in shock. He let out a roar of rage after lowering his head with a sneer on his face and snapping in frustration. But Zetsu stayed put, filming the entire altercation. Since he had lost all motivation to fight, Naruto lowered his head and sat down, waving his tails behind him. He squinted in rage and roared loudly again into the village. The surrounding area was shocked by the shockwave it produced. Hiruzen was aware that he needed to take action regarding Naruto, but what exactly? He would probably act like the nine. Tails in this situation, attacking both friends and foes, or anything he perceives as a threat. Then Hiruzen saw Sakura, Sasuke, and, most importantly, Nariko hiding next to a building that had been destroyed. What a waste, what on earth are they doing here at this particular moment? Sakura's hand suddenly touched the slightly damaged wall, causing a small portion of it to fall to the ground. As nine. Tails Naruto heard the crash and turned his head in the direction of the source with a startled growl. Hiruzen swore. Then he saw the three and turned to face them with a snarl of evil. When Nariko, Sakura, and Sasuke realized they were being watched, Naruto had already disappeared from view, reappeared in front of them, wrapped each of their tails around them, and slammed them against the wall. The nine. Tails' chakra was burning their skin, and all three of them let out a cry of pain. With a snarl of excitement, Naruto began to slowly and painfully tighten them. Naruto no! Exclaimed the Hokage, who rushed to try to stop them. When the Anbu at the scene threw shuriken and kunai at Naruto, he turned to face them and used a tailed beast sonic roar to repel them. Sasuke performed a series of hand seals after he somehow wriggled his arms free. After that, he took a deep breath and used chakra to compress it in his chest. Fire release. Great fireball technique. Naruto was knocked away by a fireball the size of a training ball and was furious about it. With irritation, Naruto glanced back at Sasuke and snatched him up with one of his tails, squeezing him more forcefully and quickly than he had intended. The squeeze grew tighter, and Sasuke winced. Naruto smirked and growled. Sakura yelled, "Let go of Sasuke!" as she and Nariko charged at the human-tailed beast. When Naruto saw this, he struck her with his fist, sending her flying into the debris. To everyone's surprise, Nariko, however, ducked the tail that was intended for her and punched him, nailing him squarely in the face. The unexpected punch did not injure Naruto, but he let out a cry of pain. This infuriated Naruto, who threw Sasuke aside and struck Nariko in the face with a punch enhanced by chakra. With a cry of agony, Nariko collided with the remnants of a building's wall. She coughed up blood after being punched in the abdomen. After pinning her to it, Naruto lifted his arm and the nine. Tails' arm bones attached it, then swung his fist at her. Time slows down as Nariko watches an arm approaching her, and her eyes widen in sheer terror. The creature paused, its fist inches from her face, and she thought this was it. Everyone stopped, including the elderly Hokage, as it lowered it and gave her a close look. After examining her for a while, he said something that made everyone's eyes widen and freeze. Mo-tu. Stuttering in bewilderment and curiosity, Naruto's deep voice said. Nariko's eyes widened in surprise at this. Was she looking at her brother? Before long, he heard everyone shout, and the elderly Hokage turned to look. Wood release technique. Wooden beams emerged from the earth and began to restrain nine. Tails Naruto, who roared in shock and bewilderment. Naruto let out a strained roar and had to let go of Nariko, who was still stunned by what it had said. Hiruzen and two Anbu were able to enter, retrieve the three, and take them to safety as a result. The old Hokage and his Anbu let the kids go after they were a few yards away. After exhaling in relief that the kids were unharmed, Hiruzen turned to face the Anbu, who was attempting to restrain Naruto. Hiruzen grinned appreciatively and said, "You arrived just in time, Tenzo. Good job." Standing at 5 feet 10 inches, Tenzo had black eyes that were obscured by his mask and short brown hair. He was wearing the typical Anbu uniform, which included a cat's mask with red and green markings and a sword strapped to his back, but he was missing the Anbu's distinctive spiral tattoo on one shoulder. Tenzo strained his voice and held his hands in the snake seal as 9 Tails Naruto fought to break free from his restraints. "Thanks Hokage Sama, but we have to do something about Naruto," he said. "I can't hold him for long. Besides that, he's a threat to everyone around him due to the 9 Tails influence." Turning to the kids behind him, Hiruzen gave the order, "Understood. Try to hold him for as long as you can until we can think of something to help Naruto. Nariko's presence is already problematic, but why are Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha in this location?" As he reprimanded them, Hiruzen said gravely, "All right, what are you children doing here? Do you know what kind of danger you put yourselves in?" With the exception of Sasuke, who was frowning and looking to his left, the three of them lowered their gazes with guilt on their faces. Sakura went on to tell him that they all felt the explosion and that they heard some villagers discussing the 9 Tails. They simply wanted to see what would happen. She went on to say that they discovered Nariko was Naruto's twin sister and that they were searching for him because they thought he was involved in all of this. Hiruzen let out a sigh because he had not anticipated this to occur in this manner or so quickly. In a few years, he hoped, he would tell Naruto about his mother Kushina, who has been in a coma since the 9 Tails attacked Konoha, and his twin sister Nariko. But everything that has transpired has compelled him to take action. Sakura, whose clothes were ripped and filthy, pointed to Naruto, who was in 9 Tails form version 2, and said, "But Hokage Sama, what is that creature? It looks somewhat like a demon fox. Is that the 9 Tails?" Looking back at Naruto, who was restrained by Tenzo's wood release, Hiruzen sighed and said, "Regretfully, not quite. The creature you see in front of you is actually Naruto Uzumaki containing the 9 Tails power in humanoid form." With shocked and appalled expressions on their faces, the three kids gazed at the third Hokage before turning back to Naruto. In shock and horror, a distraught Nariko exclaimed, "That creature is Nichin?" Sakura shook and wept as she questioned, "But how did he end up like this?" As more Chunin and Jonin, level shinobi, including his former teammates Homura and Kaharu, arrived on the scene in battle attire similar to his, Hiruzen looked behind them. "That's what we want to know," a male voice called out, startling Nariko, Sakura, and Sasuke. Hiruzen let out a frustrated sigh, knowing that another headache was on the horizon. With frowns on their faces from what had transpired, Homura and Kaharu turned to face Hiruzen when they saw 9 Tails Naruto. "Hiruzen, what is the meaning of this? You told us that you had Naruto under control." Kaharu screamed at her former teammate as Ho to assist her. "You say you had assigned Hinata to watch over him and in case he was provoked, calm and control him along with Kakashi watching them both from afar. How could this have happened?" When a voice said, "It happened because someone stopped me from interfering with the fight that broke out," Hiruzen, Homura, and Kaharu turned to see an Anbu standing by Kakashi. Kaharu and Homura blinked as they stared at him. "A fight?" inquired both advisors. As he took his place beside Hokage, Hiyashi said, "Yes. Naruto was on his way here to study with Hinata when a mob attacked him," turning back to face the restrained Naruto. Hiyashi pointed to the unconscious Ruasu on the ground and said, "That Chunin there organized a mob." After gasping in surprise, Hiruzen, Homura, and Kaharu narrowed their eyes and said, "Ruasu Hasagawa. You know him?" Hiyashi and Kakashi turned to face the trio. "Yes, he is a former Jonin, now Chunin, level shinobi that spoke out about Naruto and the 9 Tails. For speaking out about the topic and almost beating the boy, his punishment was being demoted to Chunin. He is currently an academy instructor," Hiruzen said with a low voice. "He lost his wife in the 9 Tails attack on Konoha. Unable to handle the loss, he has been blaming Naruto for it and taking it out on him ever since. He just wouldn't let it go even after being demoted. Apparently, he created a mob made up of several villagers and Chunin who hated the 9 Tails inside Naruto. They confronted and attacked him outside the gate. After severely beating him, they prepared to kill him to avenge their fallen friends and family from that night." Hiyashi subsequently turned to his daughter who had been recuperating. That was when Hinata joined the fight and tried to save Naruto. She fought with all her strength but she was no match for them. Ruasu then stabbed her in the chest, purposely missing her heart. Naruto, believing she was died, exploded into the demon fox shroud with 4 tails. All of them gazed at the injured Hinata. The fact that she could make Naruto experience this astounded many. Hinata, her classmates reflected sorrowfully. When Homura said, "So then, that was the trigger for his transformation." With a nod, Hiyashi and Hiruzen returned their attention to the battle. Naruto then fought and killed some if not all but Ruasu. Naruto was about to kill him and half of the village with a blast of condensed chakra when I stepped in and repelled it away from the village. Then a masked man appeared behind him with a space-time ninjutsu. The advisors of Hiruzen, Kakashi, and the new Anbu shouted in confusion and shock, "What? Space-time ninjutsu?" Hiyashi gave a nod and went on. Yes, and upon seeing him, Naruto attacked him with ferocity, but was outmaneuvered and knocked into a building. Anger even more, he grew 2 more tails and the skeleton of the 9 tails. After that, they have been battling it out. They both are evenly matched in strength and skill. The masked shinobi then noticed us and vanished after speaking a few words to Naruto. They all gazed at Naruto, the struggling 9 tails, as he attempted to escape Tenzo's wooden restraints. Kaharu said gravely, "Hiruzen, we have to figure out how to stop the 9 tails from controlling the boy before he goes all the way." Hiruzen let out a sigh and said, "I know, but the question is how. Tenzo is not strong enough to suppress it like Hashirama-sama could." The chakra of the 9 tails suddenly spiked, and Tenzo exclaimed, "Damn it, I cannot hold him, he's breaking free." Everyone turned to stare at Naruto. Behind him, a second tail appeared, giving him 7 tails in total. The skeleton then developed tailbones before disappearing into the chakra shroud, which was hardly perceptible from the outside. To exacerbate the situation, Naruto had become larger. The 4th sealed half its chakra, making him as tall as the 9 tails. He was now the 9 tails in a giant shroud. For a better view of his appearance, view Naruto's 7-tailed transformation image from Narutopedia. His size had caused the wood bindings to crack as he was thrashing violently against them. After struggling for a few moments, Naruto roared as he managed to escape Tenzo's wood release restraints. Then, aiming for Tenzo, he roared and threw a clawed hand down at him. When a dark blue blur passed them and everyone heard someone yell, "Hinata! Sama!" Hiruzen was ready to use an earth release technique to stop him. 9 tails. Naruto paused as the blur came to a stop, and the claw on his index finger was just inches from Hinata's face. Hinata, who had just been healed by the medic, heard and witnessed what had transpired. Hinata rushed in front of Tenzo and used her human shield to stop Naruto in spite of the protests of a Hyuga and a medic. Hinata cried bravely, hot tears streaming down her cheeks, "Naruto-kun, stop please. Snap out of it. I am all right, you don't need to do this anymore." 9 tails. Naruto lowered his enormous face toward her and withdrew his hand. Hinata, he stammered, his eyes widening in shock and disbelief after squinting at her for a moment with a low growl. The words caused everyone to sigh with relief, and Hinata's heart to leap with joy and smile. She was able to reach him. She managed to bring him back to reality by doing the impossible. Now, even Kaharu and Homura were starting to understand why Hiruzen had chosen Hinata to remain by his side. They could see that Naruto was still in version 2 form inside the giant fox shroud as the chakra and bones of the 9 tails started to fade away. He gradually made his way back to the original version of the demon fox shroud, dropping tails as they withered away one by one. Unbeknownst to them, Ruasu woke up and noticed what was going on. He thought this was his opportunity to finally get rid of the 9 tails. He was determined to kill the demon fox, so he jumped into action, grabbed a sword from one of his fallen comrades, and changed at the 2. Noriko didn't cry out, "Nichin, look out," to warn everyone of what was happening until she saw the man rise and charge at them. After his eyes widened in surprise, Naruto glared at Kurama and said, "Kuma, I need some of your chakra for a moment," telepathically. Despite having 2 tails now, Naruto was still wearing the version 1 demon fox shroud. He stabilized it, growled, and squinted at the charged Ruasu before turning to face him. Then, as he stood there in a slouched position with his arms out from his sides, the 2 tails wrapped around his body and changed him into version 2, forming a crater beneath him. Before roaring and leaping at Ruasu, Naruto yelled, "You fucking bastard," and suddenly materialized in front of him. Naruto ducked beneath him, kicking his in the air, then materialized above him, clamped his hands together, and slammed him into the wreckage of a building before he could react. Then Naruto landed in a crouch with grace. As he sank into a crouch and smirked, Naruto questioned angrily, "You just couldn't stay down, could you?" Kurama grinned and told Naruto to go for it. Subsequently, Naruto sat with his back diagonal to the sky and lifted his head above it with both tails. Orbs of black-red positive and light blue negative chakra emerged from the tails and gathered into a dark purple ball the size of a grapefruit in front of Naruto's mouth. He yelled, "Tailed beast ball," through his gaping mouth before hurling it at Ruasu, who was standing upright in the debris. He was struck squarely by the chakra orb, which burst into a tiny but potent wave explosion. After the smoke cleared, the more completely destroyed building had nothing left of Ruasu that would even indicate his presence. The fact that Naruto simply blew that person away astounded everyone but the elders. The Hokage and the elders were grateful that Naruto had just taken a bothersome thorn out of their side. Kurama grinned and remarked, "Naruto, good job." Naruto sneered and said, "Humph, good riddance," as he got to his feet and finally let go of the demon fox shroud that had come back into his body. Then, with a grateful smile, Naruto turned back to Hinata and approached her, giving her a hug. Naruto said, "I'm glad you're okay, Hinata tt Ibeo," with a tear streaming down his cheek and a relieved tone. The hug startled Hinata, but she promptly gave it back while crying with happiness, saying, "And you, Naruto.kun." After letting go of the hug, Naruto faced the other characters. He was shocked to see not just the Hokage but also Sasuke, and a young woman who looked like his mother. The Hokage became perplexed as he and Hinata approached them and gave him a chilly look. Sasuke said, his expression neutral, "So dead. Last, you're the host of the 9 Tails, hun?" Naruto said, "Yeah, I am. Didn't know about until recently though," and he glared at Sakura. Sakura shuddered at his look and the way he spoke about what had happened. Sakura started to say, Naruto, but Naruto cut her off. "Save it, Sakura, I don't want to hear it right now. Maybe some other time," Naruto said icily while closing his eyes and fighting emotional control. Sakura nodded and lowered her head in silent tears, feeling awful. Naruto then turns to face the other individual. Like him, the girl had a round face with whisker marks, violet eyes, crimson hair that reached her lower back, and fair skin. Her outfit consisted of a yellow kimono, a short-sleeved mesh shirt, dark blue shorts, a green obi, and brown standard shinobi sandals. For the first time, the girl in front of him was focusing on her brother. He had fair skin, whisker marks on his face, blue eyes, and spiky blonde hair. He wore green cargo pants, blue sandals, and a hooded orange jacket with a red whirlpool spiral on the back, all of which were slightly damaged from the previous fight. He wore a blue shirt underneath the jacket. Along with everyone else, she also saw that his right eye had a recently healed scar that extended from the cheek to just above the line of his eyebrows. Naruto said, "And who are you?" in a softer voice. With tears in her eyes, Nariko replied, "I'm Nariko Uzumaki, your twin sister Nichin," as Naruto's eyes widened in shock. "And you should also know that Kachan is still alive." Like Naruto, Hinata was taken aback. The entire world abruptly slowed to a crawl for Naruto. He had a sister. "My sister and I are twins. Is my mom still alive, too? How is that possible?" he asked incredulously. The Hokage informed me that Naruto's eyes turned red with a slit, and he then narrowed them and stared at Hiruzen. The Hokage. Once more, he deceived me. Hiruzen was familiar with that look and knew why. Even though it was for his protection, he kept his mother and sister away from him, even though it hurt that Naruto was staring at him that way. But given what has transpired, it is evident that Naruto is now capable of caring for himself. "I just found out today that you were my twin brother when I ran into Sasuke.san and Sakura.san. After they told me about you and describing you, I intently knew you were my brother. The Hokage told me that you died the night Tochin died fighting the 9 Tails. So please, don't abandon me Databasu Nichin." Nariko interrupted Naruto's thoughts by giving him a tight hug and sobbing into his chest. In his sister's arms, Naruto stood stunned. He would turn his back on his sister, because he understood what it was like to be rejected. A gentle smile softened his eyes. Then, to his sister's surprise, he put his arms around her. Telling his twin sister, "Don't worry, Imoto. I would never reject you. You were deceived as much as I was." Naruto was kind. More tears welled up in Nariko's eyes, and he sobbed into his chest once more in relief. "I myself just learned that I am the son of the 4th Hokage and you are his daughter as well," he said after her sobs subsided. Those words caused the eyes of Nariko and the others to widen. Hiruzen was a little taken aback by his discovery, but given what had just transpired, he should have been taken aback. "How did you find out?" he said with a sigh. Naruto released his sister and looked at Hiruzen before turning to face Sasuke. "That masked man who called himself Tobi mentioned it in the 9 Tails confirmed it was true," he said. "He also happens to be the Uchiha that released the 9 Tales from Kachan and forced her to attack Konoha until Tochin released her from his control before sealing her in me. I also believe he helped your older brother wipe out your clan Sasuke. Everyone present was shocked and horrified, but Sasuke, the Hokage, and the elders were particularly affected. That man was responsible for the Uchiha clan massacre and the Nine Tails attack on their village. Furthermore, the fact that he was pursuing Naruto and her did not help. Her? What do you mean, her? What was on everyone's mind? Sakura inquired. When Naruto heard that question, he grinned and said, the Nine Tails is a woman. Isn't that shocking? This is directly from the mouth of the horse, or in this instance, the vixen. They all assumed the Nine Tails was male, but Hiruzen, who already knew the Nine Tails was female, was the only one who noticed this. And Toby promised that one day he would come back to destroy Konoha and take the Nine Tails from me. Naruto turned to face the Hyuga's compound and said, she and I are determined not to let that happen. It stings to know that you withheld the fact that I am the fourth son from me, but I can appreciate your desire to protect me. I need time to calm down. Can I see Kachan when I do? With a sidelong glance at Hiruzen, Naruto posed the question. I guess I owe you that much, Hiruzen said, letting out a sigh but nodding in agreement. Please come to my office if you need to talk. Thanks, Gigi, Naruto said quietly in response. Before all of this occurred, Hinata allowed us to complete the study we had committed to. If you would like, Nariko, you are welcome to join us. Yes, Nichin. Anyway, I need some help, she replied with delight. Hiruzen smiled as he thought, it's good to see that the old you is still there, Naruto. I hope to make amends for keeping the truth from you. Naruto, Nariko, and Hinata then entered the house.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.